Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight we step past the rusted gates into forgotten graveyards where silence isn't empty. It listens. You're about to hear 5 terrifying true cemetery horror stories. Shadows that move without bodies, voices that whisper names they shouldn't know, and footsteps that follow when no one is there. This is a brand new channel and my goal is 1,000 subscribers this month. But here's the strange part. Almost 90% of people who watch never subscribe. They just disappear into the dark. Don't be one of them. Hit that button now because in this place, once you leave, you might not come back. Kill the lights. Mute the world. Let's begin. I'm not the kind of person who goes looking for haunted places. I work rideshare, I drink too much gas station coffee, and I try to bring my mom groceries on Sundays. That's pretty much my life. But if you drive in the southwest suburbs of Chicago after midnight, you get familiar with certain roads, and one of them is Archer Avenue in Justice, Illinois. The stretch that runs past Resurrection Cemetery. I always hated that part. It isn't dramatic. No giant iron gates or castles, just a dark fence, some trees, and a cold feeling like the street lamps don't quite reach. Archer is a shortcut. Everyone uses it. In winter, the wind knifes across the road from the cemetery side. In summer, heat hangs low in the trees and climbs into your car when you crack the window. If you drive for a living, you learn the weather like a language, and that strip of road always had its own grammar. A hush that made my engine sound louder, like I was intruding. I'd heard the story of Resurrection Mary in the way you hear, about any local legend, half sarcasm, half tradition. A girl in white, a hitchhiker who asks for a ride and disappears by the gates. I laughed the first time someone mentioned her. It was at a late-night diner a few miles off Archer, one of those places with sticky menus and coffee that never gets better, no matter how many times they refill your cup. My friend Evan, who drives days but drifts into nights when he can't sleep, told me how his dad used to warn him about Mary when he was a kid. The waitress with the cracked red nails shook her head, said her aunt once picked Mary up in the 80s and didn't sleep for a month after. I don't believe in ghosts. That's not a personality trait. It's just a map I draw around my life so I can keep doing it. And then last February on a Tuesday I picked up a ping at 12:41 a.m. The app showed a pickup on Archer, just past the bowling alley a few blocks before the cemetery. The name on the request was M. No rating, no photo. People make burner accounts to avoid fees and weird flags all the time. I accepted because the night had been dead and I needed the fare. I saw her before my car registered her in the headlights. She stood on the shoulder as if she'd been there already, like the night folded her out of a seam and set her upright. White dress, not floaty, more like an old prom dress, satin gone matte from weather, hem dusty, hair pinned back. She didn't wave. She just looked at me, then past me, then back again. Her face was ordinary. That's what got me. She didn't look like a movie ghost. She looked like someone's sister who had been waiting too long. I slowed and rolled the window down a crack. "UM?" She nodded like it was a secret I'd guessed. When she slid into the back seat, the air went cold. Not, oh, the window is open, cold. Cold like the car had been parked in January all night and I'd just turned the key. "Where to?" I asked. "Home," she said, and I almost laughed because people say that on rideshare a lot when they're drunk and sad, but she said it like a place she knew by heart. "It's close," she added like she was reassuring me. "Okay," I said. "Address?" She didn't answer. My app still spun on connecting. No map, no blue line, just a white circle, looking for signal that was definitely there. I have a dash cam, the cheap kind, and it showed my face in the rear cam. Eyes flicking up, a small line between my brows. "The cross street?" I tried. "Major intersection?" "Archer," she said, which wasn't helpful. Then, "The ballroom." I know the old ballroom burned down a few years back, the Willowbrook. People still call that corner the ballroom, like the ghost of a building left its name when it left its brick. "Okay," I said, buying time. "We'll head that way." We drove in silence. I kept telling myself I was being weird because of the legend, because of the white dress, because the heater was on high and my breath still felt thin. Her face reflected in my rearview mirror like a smudge I couldn't wipe off. Not quite centered, always a little too far left or right. She held her hands in her lap, one palm cupping the other like she was afraid to drop something. Right before the cemetery, my Bluetooth crackled and the radio switched itself to AM. I didn't have AM on. A song came through like it was being played in the next room. Strings, old-fashioned, the kind you want to call a waltz even if you don't know dances. It lasted 5 seconds and cut off. I glanced back, heart where my teeth should be. "You hear that?" She nodded. "They were playing it that night," she said. Goosebumps climbed my arms under my jacket. I pulled into the right lane, planning to U-turn at the light near the old ballroom site and pretend the address matched whatever she pointed to, drop her where she wanted, collect the fare, leave. But when my car rolled even with the first break, in the cemetery fence, when the gate's dark bars slid into alignment with my passenger window, she grabbed my shoulder from the back seat with a hand so cold and strong I gasped. "Don't," she said, not loud, firm. "It's not safe to stop." Instinct flinched me into the left lane. A second later, a truck in the right lane blew through the yellow light doing 50. If I had slowed for the U-turn, we would have met fender to fender. "Jesus," I said. She took her hand back like she was embarrassed. "Sorry." "Don't be," I said, and my laugh sounded too bright, like someone warming up for a lie. We passed the gates. The hairs on my arms settled. "Do you want me to pull into the lot up here?" I asked. "At the lounge?" "There's a bar across from the cemetery that's famous for lighting a candle to Mary, though I'd never been inside. It seemed like a safe, stupid suggestion." "No," she said softly, and the no carried something I didn't understand but felt, like grief. I drove on. The road opened into a stretch with houses pulled back from it, porches unlit, snow crusted in the corners of chain-link fences. "Here," she said, and her voice went far away. "Home." I looked back. The seat was empty. The temperature climbed a few degrees, like my heater was suddenly allowed to work. My rear cam feed showed nothing but the back seat across both lenses. My app stopped spinning and showed trip complete. I didn't see a fare and couldn't mark it cash because it wasn't. The only new thing on my screen was a tiny, gray, unhelpful "Thanks." I pulled over anyway, just past the old ballroom corner, next to a curb piled with dirty snow. My hands shook on the steering wheel in little private earthquakes. I told myself I'd dropped a nervous girl off at a dark house and she'd gone in fast and quiet and I'd missed it because I was watching the road. I told myself all the things that put maps back on the world. That might have been the end of it, except when I got home and peeled off my jacket, there were 5 white marks on my shoulder where she'd grabbed me. Pale fingerprints like freezer burn. They didn't hurt. They didn't go away for 2 days. The next afternoon, I went to Evans and tried to tell the story like a joke. He listened, mouth going funny, and then asked if I still had the footage. We scrubbed the dash cam video frame by frame. It's a cheap camera, but it shows the outline of people in the back seat well enough. From the moment she opened the door, the rear camera fuzzed for exactly 4 seconds, returned to normal for one frame that showed the impression of a shape, then fuzzed again. "Evan, that could be anything." "Me. It is anything." We watched the AM radio blip, the truck fly through the yellow, the empty rear seat. I don't know what we were looking for. A face. A mistake. Relief. He looked at my shoulder when I showed him the marks. His eyebrows crawled up his forehead in a way that I knew meant he was trying to respect whatever fate's coin toss had given me, while also calculating whether it could become content. He runs a tiny channel where he talks about local oddities. 35,000 subscribers, barely enough to monetize. He didn't suggest making a video. Not yet. I was grateful for that. For a week, I avoided Archer at night. It cost me money. A lot of the late fares that pay in cash and quiet come from the strip of clubs and bars and bowling alleys on that route. I took the long way around, added 15 minutes to everything, smiled through complaints like I was sorry for a traffic jam I had created in my chest. Sleep was weird, not night terror weird, just thin, like I could hear a room under my room where the air had to be pushed in with bellows. Then, the app pinged M again, same time, 12:43 a.m., same marker on the map, Archer, a couple blocks shy of the cemetery's west gate, no picture, no rating, you can refuse rides. I know. I almost did. But there was this stubborn thing in me, the part of you that wants to face the bathroom, mirror with the lights off and whisper the name 3 times just to prove you're not that kind of person. So I accepted and told myself I'd roll up to the pin and let the timer run out if no one was there. No one was there. There was only air and a street lamp flickering a little because sodium lights do that when they're dying. I watched the countdown. The app told me to go on without the passenger. I put the car in drive. Forget it, I said out loud. The back door opened and shut. The car rocked. Everything inside my body pulled tight like a snare drum. I didn't turn around. I looked in the mirror and I didn't see anything, just the shape a person should make. Like heat mirage, on a highway. The scent in the car changed too. A whisper of old perfume, something like lilies watered a day late. Home, I managed. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, I don't like when I can't open the door. I swallowed air that wasn't helping. Do you want me to stop? No, she said, and it came out almost shy. Please. Not here. I thought about asking where here was to her, but I put my blinker on and eased into the left lane. Like last time. The AM radio didn't flip, but my phone screen dimmed itself and wouldn't brighten when I tapped it. The heater clicked and clicked like it wanted to and couldn't. We drove past the gates. I stared straight ahead until my peripheral vision loosened and told me nothing impossible was happening to the world. The ballroom? I asked. The lights, she said, and I understood her no better and better at the same time. We passed the corner where the ballroom used to be. I slowed a little against traffic because something in my chest was telling me to, and a second later a deer came out between 2 parked cars and made a decision not to die right in front of me. It looked at me as I idled and then took a step back so I could pass, like an agreement had been reached. Thank you, she whispered, and the way she said it made my hands prickle, like the thanks wasn't for me. Who are you? I asked because it felt like trying to leave a party without finding the host to say goodbye. She didn't answer that either. We reached a 4-way stop that always feels like a test because the angles are weird and the road slopes down a hair. As I paused, my eyes slid to my rear view like they had developed their own reflex. The back seat wasn't empty. It wasn't full. It looked like someone had sat there for a long time and gotten up. The cushion dented, the condensation of breath that didn't resolve into a mouth. I turned to look properly, breaking my own rule. The seatbelt on the passenger side was pulled across and clicked into the buckle. I didn't feel it move. I didn't hear it. I could see it latched. I touched it. The metal was so cold it burned me, and I jerked away, half laughing, because that's what you do when something you can't use words on touches your life. The third time I picked her up, I didn't get a ping. I just drove Archer at 1 a.m. because the night was fat with fares. A group of guys from a league game needed a ride to Bridgeview. A bartender wanted to go 6 blocks but not walk them alone. I turned toward the cemetery because it shaved 4 minutes and I was tired. The back door opened at the light. Her perfume came in like memory. I said, I don't know how to help you. She said, home, and that was the only word we had in common. This was the night I made a mistake. When we drew even with the main gates, I slowed, not to stop, not to gawk, just enough to see, the way you look into a house you grew up in, after someone else buys it. The gates were closed, heavy bars crossed, chains tight. My headlights poured through and hit the first row of stones, and I felt movement. Of course you see movement if you're looking for it in a cemetery at 1 in the morning. Leaves, shadows, tricks. But this wasn't peripheral. It was the direct kind, the kind that breaks your map. There was a figure inside the gates, not white like a dress, not black like a shadow. Gray, tall, watching. Its head turned too slow for a person, like it had to think about each degree. I stepped on the gas without meaning to. Her hand came forward again and rested on my shoulder. It was softer this time, warmer, like she was learning my temperature. "Don't look at them," she said. "Who? Not everyone wants to go home." Something in the shape beyond the bars tilted. The bars themselves looked— this is going to sound like I'm embroidered with the story, I know. But they looked burned, not glowing, not on fire. Discolored on two of the middle slats up high, like hands had grabbed them too hard once. Maybe it was weather. Maybe it was my stupid brain filling in the legend's blank spots with images it had scavenged. Maybe. I ran the light. A horn scolded us from a block away. My hand shook. She took her hand away like she had chosen not to be familiar. At the ballroom corner, I slowed because I didn't want to slam into a future I couldn't explain again. Nothing happened. The road lay down in front of us like a ribbon that had always been there. I exhaled. "Mary," I said, trying it the way you try a name when you recognize someone from a long time ago. "Is that you?" Silence stretched. Above us, a plane dragged its light toward Midway. Somewhere behind us, a siren hummed and disappeared. "Yes," she said finally. I nodded, like this was a conversation. Do you want me to take you to a specific place? Do you want me to stop somewhere?" She leaned forward, an inch. And that's when I saw that her hair wasn't pinned back. It was combed smooth, short, like a style from a photo you'd find in a box at a junk store. She smelled less like perfume and more like wet wool. "I want to go home," she said simply, a person ordering what they always order at the diner. "What does that mean?" I asked, not mocking. "A street? A house?" She didn't get frustrated. She said, "It used to be. Now it's a corner. I always miss it and I always don't." "Is it the ballroom?" I asked. "Yes," she said, and I saw tears in a reflection that may have been road salt in my windshield. And it's not. I didn't know what to do with that. I drove on, past the river that looks like a sewer at night and a mirror in the day, past houses with satellite dishes like tin ears, past the lot where a church used to be. At a stop sign, I pulled my hands off the wheel to show I wasn't going to do anything sneaky. "Mary," I said, "how did you—" I didn't know how to finish. "What happened?" I landed on like an idiot. Her voice went light, like she was telling me a secret she wanted to forget. "There was a dance," she said. "There was laughing in the hall and the floor was slick. It rained. The road was black and wet and the streetlights made long spears in it. We were arguing about nothing worth dying for." She paused. "I didn't see the lights. He said he did. He said he did." I swallowed. "Did you die, leave, end? What do you need?" "I don't know," she said, and for the first time she sounded like a girl. Not a ghost, not an urban legend, just a person in the wrong part of the night. "Evan told me not to engage. He said if I kept picking her up, I was inviting whatever this was into my car, my life, my house. I told him that was superstition. He reminded me that I was the guy not stopping on Archer anymore. We bickered like brothers do when the thing they're talking about is actually fear. Then he said the thing friends sometimes say when they want, to help on their terms. Let me come with you. One time we'll do it right." I didn't want to turn it into content, but I also didn't want to be the only witness anymore. So Friday night, we did a dumb, careful plan. He sat in the front passenger seat with a second camera and a thermal imager he'd borrowed from his cousin who does HVAC. We synced times. We talked about what to do if something weird happened. Like there's a handbook for that. We made serious faces like we weren't two idiots playing with a story bigger than us. At 12:39 a.m., I rolled past the bowling alley. At 12:41, the back door opened without touching the handle. The thermal screen showed a cold void on the seat, not blue, like less warm, but a deep black hole that made the device whine softly, like it had found something outside its class. Evan whispered, "Oh man," and choked on it because the temperature dipped in the front too. Our breath showed for a second. "Mary," I said. "This is my friend Evan. He wants to help." I don't know why I introduced them. Maybe because manners still matter in the dark. She didn't respond, but the seatbelt pulled across and clicked again. Evan swore under his breath, then apologized to no one. The AM radio did its thing. 5 seconds of old strings, a ghost of a dance hall gone. We drove past the gates. Something moved behind the bars. I didn't look. At the ballroom corner, I didn't slow this time, because she hadn't liked that. Instead, I asked, "Is this home?" And just then a car with its lights off blew through the opposite stop like death-forgotten appointment. A cop in the lane behind me hit lights and chased it. If I had been easing for a turn, we would have been a story on the news. "Thank you," she said. And again, it didn't feel like it was for me. We kept going. Houses thinned. The road felt less like city and more like the memory of a country. "Lane, Mary," I tried. "If we take you to the exact spot, can you get out? Will that help?" She didn't answer. "Or do you want the cemetery?" Evan asked carefully, like a man approaching a dog that he hopes isn't rabid. "No," she said, too quick. And in that no was a whole barn of dread. "Not there." "Okay," I said, fast. "Okay." I followed the small turn she made with silence, like I had hands in the back seat steering me. When a weird thing is leading you, you decide to trust it or not. And then you live inside that decision. We ended up on a side street with houses set back deep and a row of bare trees like rib bones. "Here," she said quietly, and my headlights slid over a cracked sidewalk, a patch of grass that might have been a yard once, and a gap where a house had clearly been torn down. There was an old concrete stoop left like a gravestone for a family's address. Someone had spray-painted a phone number for roofing on it that was already peeling. "My house was there," she said. Evan held the thermal camera up. The screen showed a shape on the stoop like a wet handprint and another on the grass where my headlights settled. "I'm getting something," he whispered. Then louder, "Do you want us to leave something? To mark it? We can bring a flower, a candle." "Not a candle," she said, and her voice thinned to a wire. "The wind knocks them down. It scares me when the light moves." "Okay," I said, "we won't." "We could leave you here," Evan suggested, and immediately looked like he regretted the sentence. "I always go home," she said, and the way she said "always" made me feel like time snapped back and struck me across the face. And then headlights poured into the side street from behind us, high and angry, like someone stamping their foot with an engine. I checked my mirror and saw nothing but white light. Evan swore. The car behind didn't slow. It honked, long and mean. My brain did the math, their speed, the distance, the blind angle, and told my right foot something I barely understood. Go. I went. The street had a stop sign up ahead. There wasn't time to come to a full stop without getting rear-ended into someone's empty yard. I pulled through in a controlled roll, scanning for cross-traffic. There wasn't any. The other car lunged past the stop without looking and brushed my bumper like a breath. We coasted to a shaky halt 2 blocks on. The other car turned left without signaling and disappeared. "Holy," Evan said and stopped and took his hands off the thermal camera because they were shaking. "Not safe to stop," I breathed, and felt the words settle as if someone had just placed a book on a high shelf where it belonged. The back door creaked. The air warmed. I didn't look. I stared at my steering wheel until the grain of the plastic seemed like a map I could read. When I checked the mirror, the seatbelt lay in an innocent loop. The scent of lilies thinned. Evan let out a breath he'd been holding for a year. We sat there 3 whole minutes, engines idling down until my hands learned to be hands again. "Did we?" he started. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think we helped. I think we were there." Back at Evan's apartment, under lights so bright they made everything smaller, we went through the footage. The dash cam caught the door opening by itself, caught the seatbelt clicking, caught the AM radio flip. Those 5 seconds of music were clearer this time, like the mic had been held up to a memory. The thermal camera was blunt, a cold absence that swelled and shrank as if breathing. We watched the near miss with the no-lights car 3 times. The angle made it look closer each time, like the universe had almost folded us up. We argued about posting it. Not like click here to like and subscribe, but like putting something out in the world would untangle it. He said people would care. I said people would call us liars, and worse, they would be right to. Because the part that mattered most, the voice saying not safe to stop, the thank you that wasn't for us, the feeling that we followed someone home to a place that no longer existed, that part fails on video by definition. We didn't post it. I kept driving. You don't get to quit your job because roads remember things. But I started carrying flowers in the trunk, not roses. Those felt theatrical. Carnations because they don't give up after a day. When I drove past the gap where Mary's house used to be, I'd park carefully and leave a small bouquet on the old stoop. The first time I did, I said out loud, "For whoever lives here in memory," and felt like a fool. But the air didn't go cold, and somehow that felt like permission. Sometimes, the bouquets were gone the next night. Sometimes they were frozen in place by a thin skin of ice like cellophane. Once I found the stems rearranged in a shape I couldn't name, a loop and a line. And I won't pretend that wasn't the night I slept on my mom's couch because her apartment has less night between the walls. She asked me if I was okay. I said yes. I'm trained to say yes. A month later, I picked up a trucker at a fuel stop near the highway who wanted a ride to a motel because his rig had died and he didn't feel like dealing with dispatch. He said he'd been running Archer all night to make up time. Hate that road, he grumbled. Picked up a girl once in a damn prom dress. She squeezed my arm so hard I had a bruise. He laughed like he'd caught himself telling a story he didn't believe. She was gone by the cemetery. You know how it is. Yeah, I said. And he didn't notice that my hands found each other at 10 and 2 and tightened, making a small bridge that didn't break. He tipped cash and asked if I'd be around later. I said probably. He didn't call. Sometimes, people enter your life like a piece of proof and then leave before you have to decide what to do with it. The last thing that happened, the thing that feels like an ending, even though it isn't, was on a hot Saturday in June. The kind of heat that lifts old smells out of the sidewalks. Beer, rain, faint soap. I had taken the day off to go to my nephew's baseball game and then forgotten to actually take it off, because that's how I'm wired. I ended up on Archer again at dusk, not even thinking about the time, just letting the last of the sun knock against the windshield in coins. There was a wedding party taking photos on the other side of the road. In a park, girls in light dresses jumped for a shot and landed laughing. For a second, the light turned them all white at the edges, and my heart, traitor, stuttered. I felt stupid as soon as I felt it. Then my passenger seatbelt clicked. I pulled over because sometimes you don't decide the next thing and stared at the empty seat. The loop lay across it, gentle as a hand. The air smelled like perfume that had been left in an attic for 50 years and then opened. I didn't say her name. I didn't say anything. It felt like when someone stands beside you at a funeral and doesn't talk, because the talking has all been done, because the thing now is just to be there. We watched the wedding party laugh. The photographer told them to try one more. A little boy, ring bearer maybe, waved at my car like a prince acknowledging a carriage. I waved back. In the glass of the passenger window, in the overlay that light makes when your eyes water, I saw another reflection, a face not lined up with mine, a girl watching people be alive and happy and not arguing on a wet road. And in that reflection, she looked relieved and sad and gone. Home, she whispered. Or maybe it was the wind. Or maybe I am the kind of person who goes looking for meaning where there's just physics and grief. The belt unlatched with a small sound. The scent thinned, the seat warmed. After that night, I haven't picked her up again. I still drive Archer. I still leave flowers on the stoop when I can. Sometimes I forget and then remember at the light and feel guilty in the way you do when you miss a birthday for someone who's not alive to be hurt. The bars at the gate still look discolored to me, but I won't swear to that in a room full of strangers. I won't swear to any of this, honestly. I don't need to. What I do swear to is this. 3 times, the back door of my car opened in a place where the air is colder than the rest of the night, and someone who didn't want to be where she was asked me for a ride home. I don't know if I helped. I don't know what help means where she is. The road keeps its own books. All I can do is drive careful, keep my promises, and not stop when I'm not supposed to. If you drive Archer after midnight and your passenger seatbelt clicks on by itself, keep your eyes on the road. Don't look into the gates. Don't slow at the ballroom corner unless you have to. And if you smell lilies that remind you of your grandmother's perfume, say okay out loud and don't expect an answer. You don't have to believe me. You don't even have to care. But if you ever feel a hand on your shoulder in that stretch, cold, stronger than you'd think, listen to it. It might save you from the thing that almost took her. Or it might just be a girl who never made it home, using your life for one more mile. Either way, you'll be part of the story that everyone local tells with a laugh and a shiver, and you'll look at your shoulder in the mirror the next day and count 5 pale marks that don't hurt and don't fade until they're ready. I'm not that kind of person, but now, when anyone asks me for a ride after midnight and they're wearing white, I don't ask questions. I unlock the door. I don't stop where it isn't safe. And when we reach the corner that used to be a building and is now just a place in the air where music used to live, I whisper, home, like it's a password and hope the road hears me. I'm not the kind of person who jumps at ghost stories. I grew up in a normal family with a dad who fixed things himself and a mom who made lists and checked them twice. I'm the middle kid, the one who usually sits back and watches the other to try dumb stuff first. When I left for college at KU in Lawrence, I brought that same attitude with me. I liked late-night diners, cheap coffee, and arguing about movies in my dorm. If you had asked me back then if I believed in anything supernatural, I would have said I believe in people, how they lie to themselves, how they look for patterns, how they scare each other without meaning to. That was fall semester of my sophomore year. I lived in Templin with my roommate Marco. He was loud in a way that made strangers like him, the type who could talk a security guard into calling him a lift on a rainy night. The third person in this story is Haley. She lived 2 floors up, carried a Nikon everywhere, and did that thing where she asked questions that sounded casual but made you say more than you planned. Background people flowed in and out, neighbors from the dorm, a senior named Dan who ran the campus radio show, a bartender from Johnny's who remembered our orders after the second time. None of them really matter except to prove this wasn't me sitting in my room making up a movie. It happened around them too, in little ways. The first time I heard about Stull Cemetery was at a party during syllabus week. Somebody said it was one of the gateways to hell, and I laughed. I figured if there was a gateway to hell, Johnson County developers would have put a Whole Foods on it by now. But people got serious in a hurry. A short girl in a vintage Chiefs hoodie said her cousin wouldn't drive by Stull at night. A guy I didn't know said his dad swore the old church ruins were colder inside even in July, like your breath fogged there when the air was 95. Then someone mentioned the stone angel near the back row, the one with chipped wings. They said if you stood long enough and stared, it turned its head. Not all the way. Just enough to be sure you couldn't blame it on wind or your own eyes. It was all silly, but it got under my skin. Not the devil part, the statue part. Stone is supposed to be the least alive thing. If people were seeing movement in stone, that's a place where your brain is breaking its own rules. I figured there was a normal explanation, optical illusion, prank, misremembered angle. But I wanted to see what created the rumor. Haley wanted a subject for her photography class, and Marco was always ready to drive somewhere and tell jokes. So the plan took shape without anyone giving it a name. We'd go on a Saturday afternoon, look from the road, no trespassing. Everyone said the property owners were strict, and take some pictures while there was good light. Then we'd stop for burgers on the way back and tell everyone how dumb the legend was. When we got close, I realized I'd driven past Stull before without registering it. It's small. The wind runs over it like a hand smoothing hair. There was a thin veil of cloud and the kind of steady breeze that keeps a flag moving. The cemetery sits on a little rise with cedars and a wire fence. There were 2 other cars pulled onto the shoulder. One was a couple in their 30s keeping their distance, holding each other's elbows and laughing in that nervous way. The other was a dark blue pickup with a guy inside sipping something from a thermos and staring like his mind was somewhere else. We parked farther down and walked up the fence line. The first thing that struck me was how ordinary it looked. Sun faded, flowers, names I didn't know, a little plastic windmill someone had stuck beside a flat stone, turning slower than it needed to. Haley pointed and said, "There." And I saw the angel. It wasn't dramatic. It was about my height on a square base. Wings not spread but tucked, chipped along the edges like a piece of bread that had been bitten and left. The face was soft and generic. The right hand held what looked like a wreath. The left hand rested against the hip. If you asked me then which way it faced, I would have said southwest a little, toward the old church foundation. The head was tilted down like it was reading a name you couldn't see. Haley took photos through the fence while Marco narrated like a tour guide. Here we observe the gateway to hell, brought to you by the Shawnee County Chamber of Commerce. I remember something small and dumb. A scrap of white plastic caught under a clump of grass, flashing when the light shifted. I told myself to catalog details like that because our brains latch onto missing pieces later. The wind picked up, and somewhere a metal sign squeaked on its bracket. Normal stuff. When we left, the guy in the pickup rolled down his window and said, "Don't stare at the face too long." He said it like he was giving directions to the freeway. I asked him why, and he said, "You'll give it ideas," then pulled onto the road and drove away. We laughed when he said it. We laughed a lot that day. We stopped in Lecompton for burgers, and Haley showed us her camera screen. The angel looked flat and boring. In two of the frames, though, I told her the chin angle looked a little different. She said I was seeing what I wanted. I agreed because it kept things simple. That night I dreamed I was back there, except there was snow and the air had that empty house sound. In the dream I stood at the fence and counted my breaths. The angel had frost on the nose and along the mouth, like it had been breathing too. I woke up to the sound of tiny scraping like sugar being pushed across a plate. I sat up so fast my lower back flared. The noise stopped. Marco snored and rolled over. I told myself it was a mouse in the wall. Then I lay back down and felt something, cold under my shoulder blade. It was a pebble. I thought I'd dragged it in my hoodie and it fell out of the pocket. I put it on the windowsill and told myself I was being dramatic. Over the next week, little things kept happening that didn't make sense but also didn't feel big enough to tell anyone. I would be walking across campus and glance at the bronze Jayhawk statue near Strong Hall, and for a second, the beak seemed to tilt differently. The hallway bulletin board outside my room had a flyer with a black and white angel statue on it for some church charity, and whenever I passed, I had this weird urge to check the angle of the eyes. Twice I reached into my hoodie pocket and found grit, like the fine white dust from a new sidewalk. I did not own chalk. I was not in any class that used chalk. Haley asked me to go back that Friday near sunset. The light would be better. She wanted a certain profile. We brought a Zoom audio recorder because Dan wanted us to capture ambience for his radio segment around Halloween. We said we'd stick to the road and be quick. I told myself I'd stand there and look it full in the face and force my brain to compare angles in a normal way. The wind had died by then. It died. You could hear individual tire sounds rolling down K10 miles away. We stayed by the fence and Haley shot through the squares, while the recorder sat on the ground capturing nothing much. There were crows moving around the cedar line. The angel looked the same, which should have made me feel fine. But my stomach kept doing that tight flip like when you miss a step in the dark. I said we should do a dumb test, like engineers. We picked 3 reference points: the far fence post, a chipped stone, a crooked cedar. We lined the camera so those points made a triangle. Haley took a series of 10 photos at the same zoom every 30 seconds, while I quietly judged the angle from where I stood. Marco made a joke about Ghost OSHA. In one of the 10 photos, I swear the chin was lifted a hair. Haley said that's impossible because the camera didn't move. I said the light might have changed and made shadows look different. She said, sure, that must be it. And I could tell she was trying to convince herself. When we wrapped up and were turning back to the car, I felt something like a static shock against my shoulder blade. Same place as the first night. Not a zap, just that sudden itchy press. I dug under my hoodie collar and found another pebble stuck there, like it had been pressed in. It was the same chalky white. I laughed and tossed it back toward the grass. It bounced and rolled under the fence. When it hit, I felt the sound, more than I heard it, like a tiny tap vibrating through my teeth. On the drive home, we tried to play it cool. Marco did voices on the radio. Haley said she would develop the shots over the weekend because she liked the darkroom better than watching. A progress bar. I told them about the pebble in my bed. Marco said, "Dude, you're bringing home souvenirs." Haley didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, very flat, "Don't take anything from there again." I reminded her we hadn't taken anything. She said, "I'm not being poetic. Don't take anything from there again." That night I dreamt again. No snow this time. Just the fence and the rise and the cedars. The sound of tires a long way off. In the dream, I tried not to blink. I always thought our eyes blink without us being in charge, but if you really focus, you can hold it for a while. In the dream, my eyes burned and my throat felt dry, and I managed to keep staring until a crow flew from the cedar line and the flap made me flinch. That one flinch was enough. When my eyes came back, the angel had its head tilted a fraction more. Toward me. I woke in the worst way you can wake up, mid-breath, confused, sure you're about to choke. The window was open a crack. The room smelled faintly like wet rock. Saturday morning, Haley texted a single picture. It was the angel's face from Friday night. It looked like any angel face, except it didn't. Something about the line under the eye. I held my phone and just stared while my coffee cooled. The caption said, "Look at the left eyelid in shots 7 to 9. She sent those, and in 7 you couldn't see a carved eyelid at all because the light was wrong. In 8 there was a definition along the lower lid. In 9 there was a darker notch at the corner that read like an opening." She said, "Graphite scratch on the scan? I'm going to rescans today." Around noon she called, and her voice sounded like she'd been holding a heavy thing too long. She said the negatives looked fine. The variations were in the original frames. She kept telling me there must be a reason. Maybe the tripod slipped. Maybe the mirror in the camera vibrated differently midway through the burst. She said the word parallax twice and then said it again, quieter. We didn't go back that night. We told ourselves to leave it alone. If you're waiting for me to say, we were dared by someone at a party and went at midnight, that's not what happened. We tried to drop it for real. The only reason we didn't is because Stull didn't drop us. The pebble on my windowsill moved around that weekend. I didn't want to admit that to myself, so I kept kicking it with my finger and telling myself I'd set it in a different spot. Monday morning, it was on the left corner. Tuesday, it was to the right. Wednesday, it wasn't there at all. I shook the mini blinds and checked behind the radiator. I lifted up my textbook stack. Nothing. I figured Marco had thrown it out on accident, or I had. That night at 2 a.m, I woke to the softest tapping, not on the glass but on the sill itself. It was a light, sure rhythm. I turned on the lamp, and there the pebble sat dead center again. The tap stopped the instant the light came on. Haley told us she had been waking up with dust on her nightstand, a straight line of it as if someone had dragged a finger through and left a line. She swore she wiped it clean and the line would be back the next morning, always straight, always pointing at her closet. Marco rolled his eyes and pretended to exercise the dorm with a plastic fork. He did admit something else, though. His grandmother had given him a chain with a little cross when he left for school. He'd kept it in his desk drawer because he didn't wear jewelry. He opened the drawer midweek, and the chain was arranged in a circle, ends touching, like someone had made a tiny wreath. If you want to break a pattern like this, you need an adult who isn't inside the spell. We went to see Professor Hart, who taught a folklore elective. He liked when students visited. He'd lean back and link his fingers, and you could tell he'd give you an answer even if he had to glue it together from memory. We told him we'd been to Stull to take pictures and that we were seeing things. He asked what kind of things. He didn't smile or look skeptical. He looked like a man who'd heard worse. Haley told him about the eyelid in the photo sequence. Marco told him about the chain. I mentioned the pebbles and didn't say how it felt when I found them. I said scraped instead of pressed. Hart nodded and said, "You didn't take anything from the cemetery, correct?" We said no. He said, "Sometimes you take a story without meaning to, and the story takes you back." He said to put the pebbles back if we could. He said to Be polite while doing it. Marco asked if he meant literal or figurative politeness. Hart said both. We drove back that Thursday right after class, full daylight. No shadows to mess with our heads. On the shoulder near the gate stood a sheriff's SUV. A deputy got out and told us the obvious rules. Don't trespass, don't block the road, keep your visit short. He looked tired in a familiar way, like he got sent to say these things a lot. Haley explained we wanted to return a small stone. He stared at us for a beat, then nodded and said, "Say you're sorry and mean it." We said we would. He added quieter, "Don't look too long." I felt my face get hot like I'd been caught. We stood at the fence. I had the pebble cupped in both hands because it kept wanting to slide around. I know that sounds dumb, but the weight shifted subtly, like a battery rolling under your skin. I said we're sorry, like Hart told us, and flicked it under the bottom wire. It skipped, tapped, and came to rest beside a clump of grass in line with the angel's base. The angel faced the same as before. Down. Slightly southwest. We didn't stay. We turned to go. Somewhere behind us, a bird flapped off the cedar, that same sudden wing sound from my dream. I reflexively looked up at it, and in the same motion, I looked back at the angel because I realized what I'd just done. The head was tilted more toward us. Not a lot. Degrees. But real enough that my mouth went dry all at once. Haley breathed in and forgot to breathe out. Marco said without any acting in it, "No." The word came out flat and scared. "Maybe." "We never noticed that angle," I said, knowing how thin it sounded. The deputy had walked down from his car and stood 10 yards off with his hands on his belt, not approaching, just waiting to see what we did. It felt like he wasn't going to come closer, like this was our test and he couldn't take it from us. We did something idiotic and practical. We set rules. We agreed to leave, but to do it in a way that would keep me feeling like I could still move my life when I got back to campus. We said one of us would keep eyes on the statue while the other stepped backward, then switch, leapfrogging, so none of us stared long enough to hallucinate results from our burning corneas. It sounds smart, and it's the sort of plan people make when they're already on the wrong page. I looked. Haley backed up 3 steps. Marco's hand found my elbow and squeezed once, hard, on his way by. My eyes watered. I forced myself to stop blinking in my normal rhythm. I counted. At 20, we switched. Marco stared and I backed up. Haley took her turn. We were 20 feet away when a car honked somewhere down the road and we all flinched like the noise hit us in the back. When I got my eyes back on the face, the little notch at the corner of the eyelid was deeper. The lower lip looked as if the sculptor had taken one more pass with a chisel and rounded it. "Keep going," the deputy said, still mild. "You're fine. Don't stop." We did, step by step, leapfrog, blinking in turns. The gravel shoulder was under my heels now. I had to check behind me with a quick cut of my head and then get my eyes back to the face. You know how a trick works. You know it's your brain locking onto small changes and giving them a story. But my brain had never handed me a story with this much weight. The air felt like it pressed a palm on my chest. When we reached the cars, we still couldn't just turn and run because turning your back felt wrong in a way that didn't come from movies. I used my phone like a mirror. Camera pointed toward us so I could angle it and see the statue while facing forward. The screen showed a flatter face than what my eyes had been giving me. For a second, I thought that meant everything was fine. Then Haley said, "Why is it closer in your screen?" And I didn't want to look, but I did. The angel filled more of the frame than it should have at that distance. The base was visible at the bottom left like a footprint half cropped out, and the chip on the wing had a newer, brighter scar through it that hadn't been there earlier. We got in the car. No one slammed the doors. We did it soft, like noise might set something off. The deputy gave us a little 2-finger wave and went back to his SUV. He didn't get in. He stood beside it with his back to us, facing the fence. I drove away too, fast and slowed down after the first turn because leaving like that felt like taunting a dog through a fence and then turning your back at the last second. Nobody spoke for a while. I had the stupid thought that if we made it past the county line, we'd be fine, like it was a video game map and the trigger couldn't follow. Back on campus, we tried to file the day under weird thing, do not touch, but it didn't go back into any file. I'd be half awake at 3 and hear that sugar scrape sound on the sill again, and this time I didn't turn on the lamp. I lay there and tried to listen the way you listen to plumbing in a strange house. The scraping came in a slow arc. Then it stopped dead, like it had reached the end of something. In the silence, the room felt crowded. I walked across campus the next day and saw a groundskeeping crew unloading a marble bench near the arts building. One of the guys set a white slab down and tilted it to center it. The underside left a drag, mark on the grass. That chalky curve was the same brightness as the new scar on the angel's wing. I had to stand still and wait for my hands to stop shaking before I could keep going. Haley stopped answering texts for a day, then came to my room after dark and sat on the floor. She didn't have the Nikon. She said she'd printed a large version of frame 9 in the darkroom, and when she hung it up to dry, she could have sworn the paper warped differently along the left eye. She said she knew that's not how paper worked. She said she took it down and put it under a heavy book, then went to get coffee. And when she came back, there was a faint white dust on the book cover in a perfect diagonal line, like something had been dragged across it from left to right. She said she wiped it with her sleeve and the fabric squeaked. She said she kept feeling like someone was standing just a little behind and above her when she brushed her teeth, like a tall person reading over her shoulder. Marco joked once and then didn't joke again. He took the cross on the chain and slid it under his pillow and claimed he was doing that because his grandmother would like it. 3 days later, after we had been careful, after we had been respectful, after I had decided that I could think my way out of it if I didn't feed it, I went with Marco to a late showing of some dumb action movie at the theater with the sticky floors. We came out to a clear sky and that early winter cut in the air. A woman who ran the concession stand was on her smoke break by the door, tapping ash in a rhythm and watching the parking lot like it might do something. On the way to the car, I glanced up through habit. There are little stone angels on the roofline of that strip mall, decorative, part of the fake old world trim. I had walked under them a dozen times. That night I could have sworn one of them had a chip in the right wing, fresh and bright. When we started the car, the radio was on. There was static under the song and a steady scrape, scrape, scrape. I don't have a satisfying explanation. Nothing happened like in a movie. No chase, no bloody footprints, no dramatic possession. It was slow and it was patient, and that is worse than anything loud. It lived in the periphery. If you're nodding and thinking I was just primed to see angels anywhere, fine, that's possible. But there were moments when the thing answered back a little too directly. The next morning I woke to a single pebble on my pillow 3 inches from my mouth. It was wet, which made no sense because there was no water on the pillowcase around it. That afternoon I went to the library to get away from my room, and when I reached for a book on sculpture on the top shelf, grit fell into my eyelashes. I blinked it out and it felt like a tiny tap inside my lids. We did not go back to Stull again. If this were a story on a subreddit, I know people would be yelling at their screens telling us to go back with priests or YouTubers. That's not how real people are. Real people avoid. Real people pretend the road doesn't exist if they can. We made little bargains. Don't say the name out loud after dark. Don't look directly at any statue for more than a breath or two. Don't take shortcuts across the cemetery near 9th Street. It became second nature the way you look both ways, before stepping into a crosswalk because someone taught you when. You were small, because cars are real and so is granite. In November, a campus cop named Decker stopped me outside the Union. He knew me because Marco knew everyone. Decker said casual that a deputy out in the county asked him to pass along something if he saw any KU kids who looked like the type to go sightseeing. He said to tell us that the families buried near the back fence had asked for privacy. He said a caretaker found scuff marks on the angel's base that looked like someone tried to pry it. He said people did stupid things near Halloween. I told him we hadn't touched anything. I meant it. He tilted his head and watched me the way adults watch little kids when they lie badly. Then he said we should stop thinking about it so much. That was the first time I realized other people were getting tired of this place even when they pretended not to know it. Thanksgiving break came. I went back to my parents' place in Salina. It felt good to be in a kitchen that smelled like onion and butter and normal life. On Wednesday night, after everyone went to bed, I stood in the living room the way you do when you're home again, and everything looks smaller. We have a little shelf with knickknacks my mom loves. A glass duck, a clay bowl I made in 3rd grade, a cheap angel from a garage sale that holds a battery candle during the holidays. I moved around the room turning off lamps. When I picked up the last one on the end table, I saw a fine white line of dust across the table's middle, perfectly, straight, pointed toward the shelf with the angel. I wiped it with my hand, and my hand came away gritty. I washed off in the sink and looked at the drain and had to breathe through my mouth because the sound of the water sliding into the metal reminded me of that scraping in a way that made me feel like I was going to puke. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept seeing the Kansas sky change from night to the pale before morning and feeling like that change was a blink. I kept waiting for my door to open a fraction, and then not. I kept thinking stupidly that real angels in paintings always face forward, that we're trained to accept that gaze. The thing in Stull, even if it wasn't a thing and was just in our heads, was about angle. It was about what you caught when you were sloppy and looked away for a second in a world where looking away is how you survive. I couldn't stop thinking that somebody, somewhere, chose that one wrong second on purpose. When I came back for finals, Haley had cut her hair short. She said she did it on a whim. She said it like she wanted me to ask questions so she could keep saying it and make it real. She had new pictures on her wall of trees and streetlights and her roommate laughing. None of her pictures were of buildings or statues. The Nikon sat in a drawer. Marco had put the little cross on a chain around his neck and didn't make a big deal about it. He started locking our door every time he left the room, even if he was just walking down the hall. We all have talismans. We don't admit they are. There's not a moment where this ends. I wish there were. If there were, I'd point to it and say, here is where the story stopped and real life resumed. Instead, I moved away. Graduation came. I took a job in a city where nobody knew the name Stull, unless they were the kind of person who collects ghost books. If I pass a cemetery now, I keep my eyes on the road. If my phone camera glitches in a way that deepens a shadow around a face, I delete the shot and take another. Some nights I still wake to a tiny scrape on the windowsill, and when I do, I reach up and pull my sleeve down over my hand and lay my palm flat there like I'm pressing something into the wood. It makes the scrape stop. That could all be in my head, but it works. Last month, my mom mailed me a box of random high school stuff she found in the basement. Yearbooks, a few track ribbons, a stack of old photos from the first year of college. On top was a print from Haley that I didn't remember keeping. The angel from Stull, face soft, wings chipped, base square, and plain. The back said, in Haley's, neat handwriting, the one where it didn't move. I stared at that picture for a long time. The more I looked, the more I felt like the wrong thing about it was not movement, but stillness. Like it wasn't a statue of a person, but a statue of a pause. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't about the motion you could see. It was about the motion it held back. I put the photo back in the box and pushed the box into the back of my closet. That night I slept hard for the first time in weeks. When I woke up, there was a white mark on the floor just in front of the closet door. I wiped it with my foot and my skin squeaked on the hardwood. There was a small stone on the rug, plain and chalky. I don't live with anyone who would plant it there. I don't know where it came from. I took it downstairs without touching it with my hands and dropped it into the planter out back where the soil is damp most of the time. If stones travel the way people say they do in stories, let it go where it wants, through the dirt instead of through my house. So that's my story. I know it's unsatisfying in the way real things are unsatisfying. I know someone will offer names for what we felt: suggestion, mass hysteria, pattern recognition, cognitive drift, and I'm fine with all of those. I also know there are places where other rules feel stronger. I think it's like when you walk into a room and you know without looking that you're not welcome because silence hangs there in a certain way. I think Stull is one of those places. I think the angel near the back row is part of whatever does the hanging. If you go, if you ignore the people who live nearby and their rules and walk up to the fence anyway, don't take anything. Not a rock, not a picture if you can help it, not even a story if you can keep your mouth shut. If you catch yourself staring too long at the face, do the human thing and blink when you need to. But if you blink and when your eyes open, you're Sure, the angle has changed a hair, don't say that out loud. Don't point, don't lend it words. Words are hands, hands move things. And if you live far from Kansas and think distance protects you, I hope you're right. I tried to outrun it, and all I can tell you is this. Moving just gives you new windowsills. The night before I sat down to write this, I woke and listened, and decided the sound was only in the pipes and that I was a grown adult with a job and a life. I rolled over. I shut my eyes. When I turned the light on in the morning, there was a line of white dust along the edge of my desk, straight as if drawn with a ruler, pointing at the box in my closet with the photo. I wiped it up and my sleeve squeaked. Then I went to brush my teeth and caught myself glancing at the bathroom mirror a second longer than normal to make sure nothing behind me had turned to face me completely. Maybe that's the worst part. It teaches you to watch for things you never thought could move. You catch yourself measuring angles on buildings and statues and even people in line at the store, comparing chins and eyelids, making sure the world stays put when you look away. The angel in Stull is only one statue, one place. But now, every time I pass any cemetery, I find myself walking a little straighter, like I'm trying to be the kind of person stone can't learn from. If you're reading this, I guess the story is yours now. It feels like that matters. I hope it doesn't. I hope tonight you sleep without listening. I hope you don't wake in the dark feeling like somebody tall is standing just behind and above you, patient, waiting to see if you'll blink first. I worked nights at Greenwood Cemetery the fall I decided to clean up my life. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. I had done delivery shifts and a little contracting, and I needed a job where the hardest part was staying awake. A friend told me the cemetery hired night security who walked the grounds, kept kids from jumping the fence, checked locks on gates and mausoleums, and called it in if anything looked off. The pay wasn't great, but there was a routine, and it felt steady. I liked the idea of a quiet place to walk, away from bars and late-night arguments that had a way of pulling me in. Greenwood was 10 minutes from my sublet on 24th Street, the one with the crooked floor and the radiator that hissed like a cat. I'd grab the R train or just walk past bodegas closing their gates, the smell of fryer oil and detergent mixing with cold air. I'd cut down Fifth Avenue and pass under the Gothic arch at 25th, that black iron gate with its lacework spires, and there, I'd meet Sal at the guard booth. Sal was the old-timer. He was shorter than me, barrel-chested, hair like steel wool, and he wore a Yankees cap no matter the weather. He talked about the cemetery like it was an apartment building he'd managed for 30 years. He knew everyone buried there, names, plots which families still sent flowers which had little bronze portraits on the stones, and he knew the living too, the wedding photographers who loved the chapel steps, the joggers who tried to cut through early in the morning, the teenagers who came to dare each other at the catacombs. They always go for the catacombs, he said, like moths. He had keys on a heavy ring, a radio with duct tape over the battery flap, and a 30-year-old joke about ghosts that he told to new guys, which was me. You hear anything that sounds like a person, he'd say, you treat it like a person. You hear anything that sounds like an animal, you treat it like an animal. You hear anything that sounds like neither, you call me and don't try to be a hero. He laughed when he said it, but it lodged in my head. Greenwood is huge. 500 acres of glacial hills and old trees and ponds that catch fog like bowls. If you stand on Battle Hill, the highest point in Brooklyn, you can see the Statue of Liberty's torch through the branches, faint and orange like a star. There are places in there where the city disappears altogether. You can stand by a mausoleum, with stained glass and hear only cicadas and your own breathing. And if it's late, the hum of a barge horn on the harbor. On my first night, Sal walked me through the route. We checked the locks on the side gates, the chapel, the hillside mausoleum. He showed me the catacombs, which are not like in a movie but a long tunnel built into a hill with iron gates and names above each vault. The iron is cold even in August. By the time we circled back to the booth, the fog had crept up from the bay and drizzle murmured on the leaves. Sal poured coffee from a thermos that smelled like pennies, and I signed the logbook. "You'll be fine," he said. "The worst thing is kids. If you hear howling, it's dogs in Sunset Park. That sound comes through like a tunnel." Coyotes? I asked. You heard stories about coyotes in Queens or the Bronx. Not in these parts, he said, then reconsidered. Maybe on the expressway at 4 in the morning. Could be a siren bouncing off the stones. Sound does weird things here. He told me one other thing, like an afterthought. There used to be a guy, Eli, worked here 3 months. That one, heard howling. Followed it. Came back white as paper and quit the next morning. Don't follow sounds you can't place, that's my advice. I laughed. He didn't. Then he clapped my shoulder and told me where to find the extra batteries. The first couple weeks were easy. The tourists were long gone by dusk, and the people who wandered in after hours were either lost or trying to cut through. To 7th, you could tell the difference by how they walked. Lost people drifted, cut-throughs marched. Once in a while, we'd get kids with beer who were less dangerous than they were loud. We treated them like kids, got them to pour it out, walked them to a gate and had them climb back over under our watch so they didn't slice their hands. My radio mostly carried weather reports from dispatch and Sal's bad jokes. I liked the neatness of the rounds. I liked quiet. The city felt kind from inside the fence, like someone had turned its volume down. The first odd thing that happened was small enough that I almost convinced myself I imagined it. I was walking past the lot of Civil War dead. The little flags are out on holidays, their uniforms now just photographs at home, and the fog was pooling so low it made my boots wet. That's where I heard it. A long sound, deep in the throat. Not a bark. Not a person. The kind of sound you feel in your ribs. It wasn't loud. I stopped and checked the radio in case Sal had keyed up with the noise in the background. The channel was clear. I stood still and listened. It came again, and I knew what Sal meant about sound doing weird things. I couldn't tell where it came from. It was like it was everywhere and nowhere. Then I heard car tires on 5th and realized how quiet I had been, how even that was far away. I told myself it was a foghorn blunting itself in the trees, and I walked on. It's amazing how fast you can explain something when explaining it is easier than thinking about it. That same week, my name came over the radio even though no one was speaking. I was by Sylvan Water, the little lake near the chapel. It was calm enough that the ducks looked painted. A ripple passed like a fish. Then my radio cracked and hissed, and the static shaped itself into a word that sounded like a mouthful of cotton. Aaron. My name. My mother's voice when I was in 4th grade and she was calling me from the kitchen. It was ridiculous enough that I laughed out loud and then looked around as if someone might be hiding behind a stone with another radio, playing a prank. No one was there. I told myself the word was a coincidence, a curl of noise that sounded like a name because I wanted it too. I spoke into the mic and said, "Bass, you got something for me?" Our dispatcher Jenna replied that the board was all clear. "You lonely out there?" she said. "Always," I said. "Always lonely." I didn't tell Sal the next morning, not because I was scared he'd laugh, but because I was scared he wouldn't. When you walk the same path every night, you learn what's normal to see and what isn't. One night there was a little glass jar candle burning in front of a stone up on a knoll, the cheap kind with a paper saint glued to it. That jar was wet from fog, but the flame was steady as a little star. The cemetery forbids open flames, so I went up to snuff it. The damp grass there felt colder than the rest of the ground. The name on the stone was Partain. I rubbed the candle out with my glove and carried the jar down to the path so I wouldn't kick it over later in the dark. When I turned around, there were 4 faint ovals in the grass where knees and palms had pressed. Plenty of people kneel at graves, but the strange thing was the spacing. The prints were too far forward, as if whatever had been there had leaned so far over it should have toppled, like a person doing a push-up with their shoulders beyond their hands. Little things like that start to stack. I found a key at the base of the Gothic chapel door that looked exactly like one of mine, and, in a weird moment of superstition, checked my ring to make sure none were missing. They weren't. The found one didn't match any lock. I left it on a nail in the guard booth. Twice, motion sensors chirped at the catacombs when I was on the opposite side of the grounds. When I got there, it was wind and leaves and a faint smell like wet pennies and old lilies, the way funeral homes smell. The last time I went, I swear there were drag marks in the dirt, parallel lines like 2 fingers raking through. I stood with my flashlight and told myself it was a raccoon or a groundskeeper's cart. It was easier to picture a little masked animal than a habit I had walked into by accident. The way you can walk into a spider's web you don't see until it's already on your face. Even Sal started to notice me noticing. "You're hearing the fog talking," he said. "Don't let it get under your skin." Eli let it get under his skin, and you see what happened. "What happened?" I asked. He had mentioned Eli before in passing, always with a shrug like it wasn't worth repeating. He looked at the coffee, then at me. "Guy followed a sound," he said. "Said it was a howl. Had a night like the one you're describing. Fog off the harbor, calm, no wind. He goes walking after it like he's gonna find a dog." I told him, "Dogs don't come in here after midnight." He said this wasn't any dog. Came back and people go pale, you know? I can tell a hangover pale from a blood dropped out pale. He was the second kind. He showed me his hands and they were filthy like he'd been digging. He said he saw something by a stone, and when it turned it had his face. That's what he said. He lasted 7 hours after that. Came back at 8 to pick up his last check and kept walking south until he hit the belt. I rolled my eyes because I didn't know what else to do. But that night I used the bigger flashlight. The shift that broke me started ordinary. It was a Tuesday at the end of October. The kind of chilly that makes your teeth ache if you breathe. Too fast. The maples were yellow and slicking the paths with leaves. The drunks on 5th shouted at the buses and the sound came through the gate like a baseball game on a radio 3 rooms over. I walked my first round and everything was locked and quiet. I fed a stray cat the bottom of a tuna sandwich and she sat under a laurel bush with her paws tucked under, watching me with wise eyes like I was the animal who needed help. At 11, I checked the chapel and the hillside. At midnight, fog started to roll in from the harbor the way it does, slow and patient. Not so much moving as arriving. It threaded through the stones and hung low across the pond. I walked up toward the Civil War lot because I always did, a habit I didn't question. And that's where I heard it again. Louder this time. Longer. A howl, if you want to call it. That though I had never met a dog who could make a sound like that, it stopped me like a hand to the chest. I clicked off my light without thinking because light feels like noise when you're trying to listen. It went quiet. I kept my thumb on the switch. The sound came again, not from the same place. If the first had been from ahead and to my left, this one was behind me and to the right. I turned and my foot slid on wet leaves and I caught myself on a marble knee of a weeping angel. I thought I heard my name not in the howl but laid under it like a track. I turned the radio volume down because I didn't want to hear my own breath huffing in my ear. I told myself, don't follow it. I heard Sal in my head. Don't follow sounds you can't place. I followed it. It's not that I decided to be brave. I was curious in a way that felt mechanical, like when you hear a faucet drip and you track it through the house because it's going to drive you crazy if you don't. The drips moved. The howl moved. It led me over the low rise past the row of low stones with lambs on top, the kind for children. It led me down toward the catacomb hill. Fog lay in the hollows in a way that made it look like the earth was breathing slowly. I walked with my light off because the moon and the city glow were enough. The smell changed as I went. Less wet leaves, more iron, or maybe that was my nose bleeding a little from the cold. My hand ached from how hard I was gripping the light. There's a patch near the base of the catacomb hill where the ground dips and holds water. The groundskeepers had done their best with gravel and a ditch, but it still turns to mud when it rains. That's where I saw it. A shape next to a stone arched over it, back curved in a way that made my own spine hurt to look at. The shoulders moved up and down like an animal eating. The stone had a tall, thin profile, and from its angle, it looked like the shape was trying to crawl into the inscription, into the letters. The breath coming off it steamed and curled. It didn't look like a person. It looked like a person had been posed by someone who had never seen one stand, like a puppet with strings pulled wrong. I stayed very still. The flashlight was suddenly the heaviest object I had ever held, and the last thing in the world I wanted to turn on. My radio hissed quietly like someone clearing their throat before speaking. I didn't breathe. The thing's head turned halfway, then paused, and in the space where it should have looked at me, it oriented like it was looking at me already, even without eyes meeting. The howl started again, but softer, like humming. It spread over them, fog and through the stones and into my legs. I took a step back and my boot squelched in the mud and the sound changed. The head turned the rest of the way. My mind did a stupid thing and tried to match features. That's what brains do. They pick out eyes and nose and mouth, and if you give them a smudge, they will draw a face on it. Only this time, before I could do the work, I had the horrible feeling of recognition. Not like seeing a celebrity in a crowd, familiar but wrong, but like catching your reflection in a window at night and for a second thinking someone is on the other side. It was my face, not a mirror, not a perfect twin. My face if someone had described it to a sculptor and the sculptor had used wet dirt in their hands. The mouth smiled at me with my own mouth, and it looked like smiling had broken it some time ago. There was damp soil in the corners. The hands it put down in the mud were wrong, too long and too flat at the same time, like gloves. When it moved, my knees wanted to lock. It moved like it had been moving on all fours for a long time, and standing was a trick it remembered late. I must have made a sound because my radio hissed again and said my name in the way it had, like a memory of a voice. I raised the light because that's what my body decided without me. The beam hit the thing and it flinched like a regular animal, surprised and angry, and in that flinch my brain pushed through enough to see details. The stone it was clawing. At was for a John Aaron, my last name, my first name as a middle. People name their kids after people, I told myself. Common names happen near each other, but the dates under the name were my father's birth year, my grandfather's death year. Numbers that meant exactly nothing and everything as they lined up in my head. The thing dug at the base of the stone with my gloves on its hands. It had my keys on its belt. The ring clinked against granite with a sound I recognized because I had made it 100 times walking by a stone too close and bumping my hip. I wanted to talk to it. That's the part I still don't admit if I'm telling this to someone who I think will judge me. But it's true. I wanted to say something like, "Who are you?" Or, "What do you want?" Or the stupidest, "Are you okay?" Instead, what came out in a whisper that sounded more like breath than a word was, "Don't." It paused like it was trying to figure out where the sound came from. I took a step forward. It took a step back. It didn't do it in the way a person mirrors you. It did it like a delay, a half-beat late, like a reflection in a window when there's a flicker of fluorescent behind you. When I lifted my hand, it lifted its hand after, but higher, like it needed more reach to match me. It was wrong in the way that a person who learns a second language late stays just a little out of step with rhythm. The face that was mine tipped to the side the way I tip my head when I'm trying to hear someone in a bar. My stomach dropped because I had never seen that from outside. The keys clinked again. My keys clinked too when my hand shook. It made a sound then that I thought was a laugh until I realized it had no humor in it. It was a test of sounds. It let a breath out, and the breath shaped itself into my name in my voice, not the way the radio does when static plays a trick, but in a way that made my throat ache like I had spoken. I scraped up enough thinking to say, "Sal Bass, I need you at the catacombs," and pressed the button hard enough to hurt my thumb. The radio clicked and gave me back silence like a deadline. The thing cocked its head and then unfolded all at once, faster than I thought anything could move, up onto its feet. For a second it was my height and my shape against the fog, and I made the mistake of letting my light drop to its chest. And for the rest of my life I will carry the image of seeing my own shirt, a dark hoodie with a bleach stain at the pocket, pulled tight over someone else's ribcage. I had worn that in last night. It was in my locker. I knew it with the same certainty I knew my street address. I tried to step back and my heel went in the mud and I went down, one hand in something cold that sucked at my palm. I swung the light without aiming and the beam cut across the stone and the long grass, and then lit a second set of marks in the mud I hadn't seen. 4 indentations that matched my own palm and knee spacing as if I had just been there doing the same strange lean over the stone, like the practice runs in school before a fire drill. The thing made the almost laugh again, and I knew with a kind of childlike certainty, like how you know if you stay under the blanket the monster can't get you, that if I didn't stand right, then I would never be able to. I pushed myself up and made a noise I'm embarrassed to remember, a thin sound like a hinge. The thing took 1 step toward me. I took 1 step back. For a moment our movement matched perfectly, and in that moment the face, my face, stopped looking like mine. That was the worst handful of seconds, when it stopped trying and showed whatever it was when it wasn't pretending. The smile went flat and the eyes lost any shine, and it looked like something from a photograph that had been in a wallet too long, creased and gray and rubbed to blur. It moved its mouth, and the sound that came out was exactly the sound I had heard first weeks ago by the Civil War lot. It was the howl, deep and long and wrong. A light hit the fog behind it and made a halo, and I heard Sal's boots hammering, wet gravel. I don't remember calling again, but I must have. Later, Jenna said the last thing she heard was me saying "base" 4 times in a row. The thing bent in half with a snap like a folding chair and flickered away. That's the closest. Word, it didn't run and it didn't dissolve, there was just a blank like a cut in a film. The beam from Sal's flashlight swung where it had been and found nothing but wet grass and a stone with scuff marks at the base that could have been old. He grabbed my arm so hard it bruised, and he said my name, my real name, in his real voice. And it was the kindest sound I had ever heard. We stood there for a long time listening to each other breathe. At some point, our radios crackled with Jenna's voice asking for a sit rep that clipped half-asleep dispatch cadence. Sal said false alarm and looked at me like he didn't expect me to argue. I didn't. He walked me back to the booth. By the long way, up past Battle Hill where the fog thinned, and past the chapel where the steps were slick. He poured coffee and it tasted like pennies, and I drank it anyway. He didn't tell me not to quit. He didn't make a joke. He sat in the squeaky chair and let me wash my hands 3 times in the sink and dry them with rough paper towels until the water ran clear. The mud under my nails had grit in it like ground-up shell. When I signed the log at the end, I saw my name already scribbled there in shaky handwriting at a time I hadn't come in yet. I told myself it was a smudge from the previous line. I stood up and my knees popped. Sal said quietly, like he had practiced not saying it 100 times and finally let it out, "Don't follow sounds you can't place." I slept until 2 the next afternoon and woke with a taste in my mouth like earth. There was dirt under my nails again. A little crescent I'd missed, and I got a toothbrush and scrubbed it out and felt like I was pulling something out of my chest. In the kitchen, the burner on the stove clicked by itself. I tell you that because it happened, not because I think it matters. Maybe a draft. Maybe the knob was loose. I went back that night because I am more stubborn than I am smart. Nothing happened. Kids at the fence. A coyote rumor from Jenna because a patrol car had seen one by the Gowanus, which became a joke about hipster coyotes ordering small batch rabbits. I laughed because laughter is an approach to fear, and I took it. I did 3 more nights, and on the 3rd I heard the howl again while I was in the office doing an incident report on a broken gate lock. It sounded like it was inside the walls. I stood and felt it in my legs again and thought about following it, and then I didn't. I sat and I wrote the words I had to write. I wrote that the lock had been compromised and maintenance should be notified. I wrote my name and the date and the time. My pen left a trail of ink a shade darker than usual. The morning after, I quit. I told Sal, and he nodded like he had expected it. He gave me a handshake that hurt again in a kind way. "You want me to tell them it wasn't for you?" he said. "Or you want me to tell them it was for you, and I'll say my piece about nights and how they wear on people?" "Tell them. I got a day job," I said. "Tell them my uncle needs help in Jersey City." I didn't have an uncle there. He said okay, like of course I did. I left Brooklyn a week later. I put my stuff in a storage unit and moved to my brother's place upstate. He has a dog that growls at his own reflection in the sliding glass door when the backyard is dark. I don't like walking past mirrors at night anymore, because I catch myself in them and there's always a half second where the inside of my bones goes cold, like I'm not alone in there. When fog forms over the little creek behind the house, sometimes I think I hear a long sound under the frogs. It could be a freight train, it could be the highway, it could be a coyote. Sound does weird things at night when there's water near. If you ever find yourself on 5th Avenue near 25th at midnight, and the gate's black iron is full of birds sleeping in their messy nest, and the air smells like wet stone, you'll feel how close everything is, even the parts of the city that are buried. If you hear howling, it might be nothing. It might be old wind getting trapped in new branches. If you go in there after hours, you'll see a security guard walking with a light that makes a little cone of day around his feet. He will tell you to go home, and he will mean it more than he says it. And if, God forbid, you hear a voice you know come out of your radio, or you see a shape at a stone with a back so arched it looks like it's about to snap, you'll think, the way I did, that a person is a person, and a problem is a problem, and you can solve it by stepping closer. Don't. If you ever find yourself thinking a face looks familiar in the fog, don't look long enough to confirm it. I can live with never knowing whether what I saw was a trick of my tired brain, or a prank, or something very old that borrowed my shape for a minute. What I can't live with is the part where I almost gave it what it wanted by stepping into its delay, by letting it learn me all the way. Sal still calls sometimes. He leaves messages, quick ones. He says the drunks are the worst part. That, and tourists trying to take wedding photos at sunrise. He never mentions Howling, and neither do I. Jenna texted me once a picture of the logbook because I asked her for a number for HR, and in the corner of the photo I could see a note in a handwriting. That could have been mine that said, "Aaron on grounds." It was from a night I didn't work. That kind of thing is a memory now, not an event. You file it where you file dreams and things your aunt swears happened at a family reunion that no one else recalls. People love to tell you that cemeteries are for the living. That's true in the way a good lie is mostly truth. People also love to tell you that ghosts are just stories we tell around what we can't accept. I don't know. I know what the ground felt like when it grabbed my hand. I know how my name sounded when it wasn't really me speaking. I know what it is to see your own face and feel no comfort at all. There are a lot of versions of me walking around in the world. Old friends' memories, photos on ex's phones, the way a cashier might describe me if I left my card. That night, in the fog, there was another version that took shape out of sound. Whatever it was had a use for my outline. I don't pretend to know what would have happened if I hadn't looked away. You can chalk this up to patterns and fear and a night that lasted too long. You can call me dramatic. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you not to be the guy Eli was. Don't follow Howling when you can't tell where it comes from. If you can't place a sound, let it stay unplaced. If you ever find yourself under trees so big they block out the lights of the city in the middle of Brooklyn, and your breath smokes and the ground is slick and the names on the stones seem to lean into you, remember this. There are forms of gravity that aren't about mass. Some things pull because they look like you. Some places carry old echoes that are happy to fill whatever shape you bring them. I left the city for good. It still wasn't far enough to keep the sound out on foggy nights, but it's far enough that I don't have keys that match any gate it wants me to open. That has to be enough. I hope it's enough. I took the night shift at Hollywood Forever because I needed a job where it was quiet and I could keep my head down. I was between apartments, sleeping in my car some nights, trying to get back on my feet after a breakup and an expensive mistake with an old motorcycle. A friend of a friend, Luis, said his cemetery was hiring seasonal grounds crew to prep for the summer screenings and keep the lawns neat. I figured it would mostly be leaf blowers, hoses, and pretending not to hear tourists tell each other ghost stories. The manager, Marla, hired me on the spot after I told her I don't drink on the job and I'm fine working nights. On my first evening, Luis did the quick tour in a golf cart with a squeaky front tire. We rode past the pond with the fat white ducks, the palm trees that looked like someone drew exclamation points across the sky, the Fairbanks lawn where they show old movies on warm nights. Paramount's water tower floated over the back fence like a moon. It was late spring, still cool after dark. The city was a low electric hum on the other side of the walls. Luis was one of those guys who can talk without making you feel like you have to say much back. He's short, built like a middleweight, tattoo on his forearm that says Mama in Old English. He kept pointing things out, sprinkler boxes, electrical panels, headstones tourists ask about, and mixing in real instructions with little warnings that sounded like jokes. "That's the Abbey of the Psalms Mausoleum," he said, steering around a corner. "You'll hear a door slam there at 3 if the wind's right. Ignore it. And there, see the granite slab by the jacaranda? That used to be the bloodstone." I laughed because I thought I was supposed to. "The what?" "Blood-stained stone," he said. Back in the 90s, old caretaker named Ephraim found one headstone that kept showing up with a dark red stain along the bottom, like someone poured wine under it and the rock was wicking it up. He'd scrub it, bleach it, pressure wash it. Every dawn it was back. Supposedly smelled like a penny jar. Visitors complained. Management removed the stone years later. When they opened the ground, nothing inside. Coffin-sized hollow, like something got pulled out from below or never put in. Cemeteries are full of mix-ups, I said a little too quickly. Records get wrong. Families move people. Luis nodded. Sure, we tell people that. But ask Ephraim. He says he heard knocking from underneath one night. Real slow. Real polite. Come on. I'm not saying it's blood. Could have been iron in the water, rust from rebar, something like that. But the smell, he tapped the side of his nose and made a face. Rotten metal. If you ever catch that smell and don't know where it's coming from, just walk the other way. The cart rattled along the lane. I looked at the jacaranda he'd pointed to. Purple blossoms were just starting to pop like drops of paint. I didn't see any special stone, just a low granite ledger flush with the grass and a neat rectangle of darker sod. But I didn't say anything. I wanted to keep this job. I told myself that cemetery guys tell stories the way bartenders do, part boredom, part hazing. My first week was easy. Nights were mostly sprinklers, picking up wrappers after screenings, moving cones and signs, checking padlocks. I liked the quiet. I liked how the city thinned out to distant sirens and the whoosh of tires on Santa Monica Boulevard. I liked how the names on the stones, some famous, some not, made my own problems feel smaller. The only scary part was the raccoons who acted like they owned the place, and one security camera by the chapel that sometimes showed static for a few seconds at exactly 3:07 and then came back clear like nothing happened. Marla ran the day crew, but she'd stick around late sometimes to finish paperwork in the tiny office by the flower shop. She was blunt and practical and had a voice like a radio host who'd smoked for 30 years. Don't chase anyone, she'd told me. If someone hops the wall, call Dale, don't be a hero. Also, no viral videos. If you film anything weird, it stays on our drives. We do not feed the internet. Dale was the night guard. Retired LAPD, soft around the middle but with cop eyes that didn't miss much. He'd make rounds with a big ring of keys and a mag light. He had his own stories too. Kids sneaking in for dares. A guy who tried to sleep under a hedge for a week and woke up shivering every night for no reason he could explain. Cemeteries. Collect people, he said to me once, leaning in the doorway of the office while I filled a water jug. Not just the ones you think. Lost ones. People who come here to feel something and end up feeling the wrong thing. The blood-stained stone didn't come up again until the second Thursday. It was one of those LA days where a thin, warm rain falls for 10 minutes and makes the air smell like wet dust. I came in just before sunset and found Luis with a stack of towels and a bottle of enzyme cleaner, making a face. Got a complaint, he said. Section G, near the ficus. Lady said her shoes got stained on a flat stone that looked wet, but it hadn't rained there yet. He tossed me a towel. Come see, new guy. If we both see it, I'll feel less crazy. We walked out past the pond and the rows that looked like chessboards for giants. The clouds had already thinned to a violet smear. Traffic hissed beyond the wall. In Section G, under a late sun, I smelled it before I saw anything. Something sharp and metallic under the usual grass and cut flowers, like someone had left a toolbox in a damp basement. Do you smell that? I asked. Luis stopped and sniffed. Yeah. There. He pointed at a low granite ledger set flush with the dirt. The grass around it was clipped short. The granite itself was a pale gray flecked with black, the kind of stone you could scrub almost anything off. Across its lower edge where it met the soil, a dark stain had spread like a shadow. It wasn't bright or smeared, it was almost neat. A band of deep brown red with a hard edge, as if the stone had dipped itself into something and drawn it up. That wasn't here yesterday, Luis said. See the line? I squeegeed that yesterday morning. There was no name on the stone, no dates. Just a frame of granite around a blank field, like a picture without a picture. A small bronze vase sat empty in a socket to the right. Who's buried here? I asked. Luis shrugged. Probably nobody, if it's what I think. That blank plate is a cover. That's where the stone used to be back when... He didn't finish. He crouched, touched the stain with his gloved fingertips, and lifted them to his nose. Copper, he said, wrinkling his face. And something like, old meat in a fridge. Maybe it's a busted irrigation line, I said, even though I didn't see any water. The grass wasn't wet. The dirt at the edge looked dry and compact. Maybe, he said, get the spray. We sprayed and scrubbed. He used the enzyme cleaner while I took a brush and poured water from the jug. The stain lifted reluctantly, lightening to a faint shadow. The smell didn't go away, it just seemed to move like we were smearing it thin. A couple walking a small dog slowed down to stare. The dog planted its feet and wouldn't come closer. When we finished, the stone looked normal, if a little damp along the edge. Picture it gone, Louise said. Take a mental snapshot. I got it, I said. Now wait 12 hours. I slept badly that day. When I dreamt, it was of a hallway lined with file drawers that kept sliding out and whispering. Around 2 a.m., Dale radioed me to help him move barricades after a delivery truck left them blocking the wrong path. We passed Section G on our way back. No rain, no sprinklers. Our shoes were loud on the gravel. I pointed without meaning to. There. The stain had returned. In the beam of Dale's flashlight, it looked darker than before, almost glossy, as if the stone had put on a fresh mouth of lipstick at its base and was smiling at us from the ground. The smell was worse too, the sharpness of pennies with a sweet, spoiled halo. Dale didn't say weird or ghosts. He crouched and looked for footprints, drips, any kind of mess. He sniffed once and pulled back like he'd licked a battery. Don't touch it, he said. Leave it till morning. Document it. Marlo will decide. I took pictures on the work phone. Stain, no stain, stain again. I wrote the time and the weather in a little notebook, even though I knew it was stupid. At 3:07, the chapel camera went static for 3 seconds. When dawn lifted, the graves into that flat, honest light that shows every nick. The stain was still there. Marla stood over it with her arms crossed, looking like someone had keyed her car. She called the number on a laminated card and spoke in low, irritated tones. Yes, again. Enzymes didn't hold. No, there's no positive ID on a burial there. Yes, the cover is blank. No, it's not sprinkler rust. I know what sprinkler rust looks like. She hung up and squinted at me. You like talking to old people? She asked. Depends, I said. Good. Go ask Ephraim what he remembers. Ephraim lived in a small studio tucked behind the chapel, part of a row of crew quarters nobody used anymore. He kept the place tidy and smelled faintly of mothballs and cedar. He had a white beard and eyes that had seen enough of everything to stop being surprised. He poured me a glass of sun tea and apologized for talking slow. People have such hungry minds, he said when I asked about the stone. They want to be told this or that is haunted because clean answers are comforting. But a lot of what I saw here was more like a draft that never stopped, even when you close the window. It's not a thing, it's a lack. He told me the story in pieces, pausing to run a thumb along his cup. He'd started at the cemetery in 1989. Back then, he said, there'd been a headstone in Section G for a woman named E. He didn't want to say her name out loud because he'd promised a relative he wouldn't who had died in 1934. One of the forgotten ones, he said. Not a big star. A chorus girl, I think, or an extra. The studio paid for it. The stone was modest. Her name, the dash, the dates, and a little carved star. One morning, he'd found the bottom edge of the stone dark, like it had been licked by fire or soaked from below. He'd wiped it off with his sleeve. The next day, it was back. He tried everything. It always came back. Visitors complained about the smell. A woman fainted and accused him of some stunt to sell tickets to film screenings that weren't even happening then. And then the thing with the smell, I said, prompting him. He nodded. Iron and meat. The first time I smelled that exact mixture was on the day we took the stone up. Management wanted to move it to the conservatory and test it, thought maybe minerals in the soil were reacting with the polish. We had a backhoe and we were careful, but when we lifted it, there was no coffin, No concrete liner. Just a neat coffin-shaped cavity in the soil that didn't collapse. The sides were smooth like someone had baked a loaf and pulled it out, while the crumbs stayed perfect. I put my hand on the air above it and it felt cold in a way that wasn't the air around it. "What did you do?" I asked. I said a prayer, because I didn't know what else to do. We put plywood over it and later a blank cover. The smell faded. We told anyone who asked that the burial had been moved by the family. Some did get moved back then, but I never saw a bill of lading for that one. And I never forgot that when the stone was gone, the stain stopped. Until now, I repeated because it made my mouth feel less dry. He looked past me, out the little window where a sliver of lawn glowed. Sometimes when you take a lid off a pot, the steam doesn't leave. It just waits. I didn't plan to go back to Section G that night, but my feet took me there anyway. It's like scratching at a spot on your gums even though it hurts. The sky was clear, the stars drowned by the city. I stood a few yards away and listened. You wouldn't expect a cemetery to have much sound, but there's always something. The ducks muttering, palm fronds ticking, the big freeway a constant breath. I told myself I'd stand there for 5 minutes and then keep making rounds. My radio crackled with Dale's voice. "All good, kid?" "All good," I said. "Just checking G." "G's good," he said. "Stay off the turf if sprinklers pop." "Copy." They didn't. The grass was dry under my boots. I edged closer. The blank cover looked like any other rectangle of stone cut to fit. My eyes kept flicking up like I'd see someone walking between rows. It felt rude to stare too long at the ground. A smell rolled over me. Faint at first, then definite. A penny held in your mouth too long, spit mixing with metal. Under it was the faint sweetness Ephraim had mentioned, like the air in a sealed fridge with a package of meat in the back that had turned gray. I stepped back because the body always steps back before the mind. The smell had a direction, which sounds ridiculous but is true. It came from the seam where stone met soil. Something wet glimmered in the small spill of light from the path lamp 20 feet away. Not a puddle, more like the stone had exhaled and left a breath print. A line, darkened along the edge, first a thread, then a stripe, seeping up from where no liquid was, the way a napkin draws coffee through a cup's crack. In less than a minute it reached the same height as the morning, a precise band along the base. In another minute the smell was inside my mouth, coated on my tongue. I don't know why I whispered, "Hello," but I did. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone being careful not to wake a baby. I wasn't trying to be a hero, but I also wasn't going to back up without doing the thing you do to prove to yourself a thing is ordinary. I set my flashlight on the ground so the beam ran low across the stone and kneeled. I extended one knuckle and touched the stain. The stone was cold. My glove came away with a damp trace that was not water because it didn't bead. It smudged, like a little oil. Only when I rubbed my fingers together it tacked for a second the way a cheap bandage sticks to your skin. "Copy?" Dale said on the radio, his voice crackling in my ear and making me jump. "You keyed up." "Sorry," I whispered even though there was no reason to whisper. "All good." I stood up too fast and saw white streaks where the stars should be. A sound came from under the stone, not knocking. That would have been easier to push away as pipes or prank. This was a small, wet slide, a quiet sip, like someone moving their tongue across their teeth in a thoughtful way. The stain bloomed a fraction darker where the sound seemed to be. I took 2 steps back and heard my foot hit something hard. The flashlight rolled, the beam swung, and I saw the grass behind me flatten and then rise, like something had pressed a slow hand up from the underside of the lawn and then let go. My mouth filled with the taste of pennies so strong I gagged. I bent to grab the flashlight, but my fingers didn't want to go toward the ground. They wanted to grab the radio and call Dale and tell him to bring anyone and everyone. I did neither for a second that stretched. Then the ground opened, not like a sinkhole swallowing me. It unsealed along the seam where the blank cover met soil, a sighing sound, and a seam of black appeared, perhaps an inch wide, then 2, a delicate smile under a stone mouth. Cold air spilled up, dry and winter cold, as if a freezer lid had been cracked in July. My breath smoked. The smell came with it, so thick I coughed. The radio hissed, warped for a second, and I heard a voice that wasn't Dale's say in my voice. All good. I am not the person who sticks his face down to look. I am the person who takes 3 steps back, calls the guard, and goes to the office to pull up the camera. That's what I did. I backed up until my calves hit the path. Then I turned and walked fast, not running because running in a cemetery at night feels like something you can't come back from. Dale met me halfway like he had been coming toward me already. He took one look at my face and didn't make fun of me. We walked back together, lights low. The seam was closed. The stain looked like a dark smile again, but a shut one. The temperature felt normal. I could still taste the metal. You're white as a sheet, he said quietly. Well, whiter. You ever seen the ground open there? I asked. Not open. You heard anything from under? Not anything I liked. We stood there a silent minute like 2 guys at a bus stop who don't know each other, but know they're waiting for the same bus and hope it never comes. Then he said, Document and leave it for daylight, kid. I'll sit here a while. I went back to the office and pulled the camera for that section. The view was mostly a high angle of grass in the top corner of the slab. I watched myself walk up, kneel, stand, step back, flinch at the radio. When I backed into the light and the beam rolled, the frame shivered like heat waves, and for a second there was a black line at the seam that might have been a shadow, or might have been nothing. The microphone didn't catch the sip or anything like it. At 3:07, the chapel camera staticked for 3 seconds like always. We left the stain that day. In the morning, Marla took one look and told us not to scrub it. She called someone above her, and after a while an email came from someone above them. The language was sterile. Consult, assess, determine if site requires remediation. Meanwhile, we were supposed to rope off the area and put up a polite sign about maintenance and ask visitors to move along if they lingered. Please be respectful of restoration work. The business of death still has a business plan. People did linger. A pair of teenage girls with matching eyeliner dared each other to crouch and sniff. They both made the same face of surprise and revulsion, and then laughed, too loudly to cover it. A man in a suit carrying takeout left the lane, stepped onto the grass and froze with his foot hovering just above the slab, the way you stop yourself from stepping onto a stage before the curtain goes up. He stepped back and walked away without looking down. Luis acted like it was an irritant, not a fright. I hate when there's a thing, he said. Because then everyone wants to come see the thing, and then we have to baby the thing, and then the thing spreads. He said spread as a joke, but the word stuck to the air. 2 mornings later, we found a second stain, not as dark, not as neat. This one bloomed along the edge of the path 10 yards from the blank cover, where a seam of granite pavers met compact soil. It looked like a damp underline, like a highlighter you forgot was red. The smell was weaker, but it was the same flavor of metal and sweet sour underneath. No standing water, no broken pipe. Whoever we were supposed to be waiting for to assess and remediate hadn't scheduled yet. Now we definitely do not chase people, Marla said. We do not want footage of anyone going under any fences. Keep the looky-loos moving. Document everything. Her jaw worked. This was not the kind of publicity a cemetery wants, even if the internet would eat it up. That night I did something I'm not proud of. I took a handful of the stain on a folded paper towel and sealed it in a sandwich bag. I know that sounds like the exact opposite of do not feed the internet, but I wasn't planning to post it. I wanted to take it to a lab where a friend could tell me if it was iron oxide or animal blood or some stupid stuff I didn't know. I wanted to be told it was boring and I was sleep deprived. When I sealed the bag, the room got colder for a second. The window fogged, and when I wiped it with the back of my hand, I could smell the metal through the plastic like it wasn't there. I shoved the bag in a drawer and told myself I was being pathetic, as if the bag was going to rattle or something. It didn't. It just sat there like a stupid prank I'd pulled on myself. Around 3 a.m, the radio clicked even though no one pressed it. Copy? My own voice said, warped like a tape stretched too far. I stared at the radio, until it crackled again with silence. I keyed it. Dale? No answer. I stepped outside and found him sitting on the curb by Section G with the mag light between his boots, shining it across his own shoes like he was checking them for scuffs. He looked up at me and didn't need me to explain. "I heard you," he said. "I heard your voice from the wrong direction." From the wrong direction. He meant from under the stone. He didn't say it. We didn't have to. We both heard the ducks then. Restless mutters getting louder for no reason, like someone had let a dog loose. Then they were quiet. The palm fronds ticked without wind. The freeway breathed in and didn't breathe out for a long time. I don't know how to explain what the climax of something like this feels like because it's not like a movie. There's no swell of music to tell you this is the center. It's one quiet second sliding over the next. And it's only later that you look back and see where the line was crossed. For me, the line is the moment I saw the stain rise. We were watching the slab from about 20 feet away, half shielded by a small hedge so we didn't have to answer questions if anyone came walking by. The edge of the stone looked dry. Then, the dark band along the base deepened, like a new shadow layered on the old. The line brightened at the top, not red exactly, but a color that red wants to be when it grows up. It traveled upward by a hair's width, breaking its own rule of staying low, and for the first time I thought with absolute clarity, it's not a stain. It's a level. It stopped at maybe 2 inches, enough to be distinct in the dim light, and held. The smell flowed over us like we were downwind of a foundry that also baked something sweet and wrong. Then a sound came through the stone, not a sip, not a knock, but a voice, mine, speaking in a normal tone from under the ground saying, "All good," the way I had said it the first night. Dale stood up slowly. "Okay," he said, like to a dog. "Okay." He wasn't going to run either. He was a retiree with a flashlight and a ring of keys and a kind of old-school courage that doesn't look like courage until it's needed. He put himself between me and the slab without making a big show of it. The seam opened again. The cold came with it like a sigh. The ducks started complaining all at once from the pond and then went silent again like a hand dropped over them. The dark line along the stone brightened by a shade that shouldn't exist on rock. I could hear someone walking on a path far away. Footsteps too fast and then nothing. The voice spoke again from below in my tone. "Copy?" Then very softly, also in my tone, with an ache I recognized because it was mine the way you recognize your own cough. "Help. I did the thing you do when you're a person who has to believe in a reason for everything, or you come apart. I picked a reason. I chose that some stupid prank had been set up under there. An old speaker with a line to the chapel mic, a kid with a scanner spoofing our radios. I grabbed the edge of the blank cover because I wanted to prove that whatever was beneath it was as boring as a conduit, a pipe, a prank. My fingers slid over grit. The seam was tight. My nails scraped and a tiny flake of stone came up under one nail like a thorn. The smell filled me all the way to the back of my eyes. The cold air from the seam condensed on my cheekbones. For 1 second, I know this sounds like I'm making it bigger than it was, but I promise I'm not. I felt a breath against the side of my face from the black gap. A breath that wasn't mine or Dale's. A steady, resigned exhale like someone in a hospital bed who stopped expecting anyone to fix anything a long time ago. "Back," Dale said, not yelling. He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed, and the warmth of his palm was like a rope in a river. We took 1 step back together and the seam closed on its own, the way a pair of lips close when a person decides they are done talking. We didn't chase the voice. We didn't lift the stone, we didn't call the news. We stood until the feeling that we were in a room with someone we couldn't see faded to, just the two of us and a rectangle of rock. The band along the base lightened to the older, darker color like it was tired. The ducks started up again, tentative, and then calmed down. I lowered my hands and realized they were shaking hard enough to make my ring click against my knuckle. In the morning, the stain was gone for the first time. Not lightened. Gone. Luis stared at the clean line of stone and let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Cool," he said, distrust heavy in the word, like someone who's had a toothache for weeks waking up with no pain and wondering what he missed. Marla told us the higher-ups had decided to spotlight Section G during Publix. Hours, extra staff, more signs, less lingering. She read from a new email about community partnerships and balancing historical curiosity with respect for the interred. Corporate speak for, "Don't let a story eat us alive." That afternoon, a woman in her 70s came to the office and asked to speak to someone who remembered the old stone. She had a small bouquet of white carnations and a face that had been pretty in exactly the way you'd expect for someone who once worked in wardrobe or hair. "Ephraim," she said when he came out, and the way she softened said she'd truly known him for years. They hugged like people who only see each other when something important forces it. She told us she was the niece of the woman whose stone it had been. She didn't say her name either. She said her aunt had come to LA in 1932 and died 2 years later of something they didn't write on death certificates back then. She said the studio paid for the stone because it was good publicity to be generous. She said her mother always told her never to go visit because we moved her, but she never saw proof of that, and she just wanted to put flowers where she remembered the stone had been. Ephraim walked her out. I didn't follow. Later, he said they stood a long time not saying anything. She set the carnations down on the blank cover and said, "I'm sorry for a lot of things," very softly to the stone or to the air. Then she left. The flowers were gone in the evening. Maybe she took them with her. Maybe someone else did. That night. The stain returned on the far edge of the path, not the stone, a faint line like a tired underline. The smell was softer. The seam didn't open. I stood a while anyway because I'm stupid, because I thought not watching felt less respectful than watching and whispering a hello to the ground. I quit 2 weeks later, not because of that exactly. It was 100 smaller reasons that added up. The way I avoided Section G during rounds and pretended to myself I was not avoiding it, the way the radio sometimes popped with my voice when I wasn't talking, the way the bag in the drawer made the office smell faintly metallic even when the AC ran full. I threw it away in a dumpster on Melrose. I didn't open it. The bag was empty when I checked before I tossed it. Maybe it always had been. I don't know. I don't want to know. Luis said he understood. He said to call when I wanted to come. To a screening. "Bring a date," he said and grinned. "We'll get you a good spot. Away from G." Before I left, I asked Ephraim one more question I didn't ask the first time. "Do you think there was ever a body?" He looked at me, long enough that I felt like a kid asking where wind comes from. "Bodies are easy," he said finally. "They're solutions. You can move them. You can name them. What we had there was an absence that behaved like a thing. When we took away its name, it kept behaving." "Is that better or worse?" I asked. "It's just harder to measure," he said, and that was the end of it. I don't know if I believe in ghosts. I believe in the way certain places ask for a kind of attention you don't want to give them, and how if you give it anyway, you feel a little less like yourself and a little more like a room being filled. I know that when I drive down Santa Monica Boulevard at night and see the palms like exclamation points and the soft glow of the wall and the Paramount Water Tower, I keep my window closed until I'm a few blocks past. I know that pennies taste like a certain part of the cemetery, and if I ever taste that by surprise at a kitchen sink on a train pole in a stranger's apartment, I make a polite excuse and leave. If you go to Hollywood forever, you'll smell cut grass and sunscreen and stale popcorn if you're there on a movie night. You'll hear people whisper names like they belong to friends. You'll see ducks look at you with the flat entitlement of birds who've never known hunger. You won't see anything that doesn't want to be seen. The staff will be kind and brisk. They'll tell you what's allowed and what isn't. They'll point you to the bathrooms and the gift shop and the plots of people you've heard of, and 1,000 you haven't. But if you find yourself in Section G, and the air turns cool on your cheeks in a way that doesn't match the night, and the grass at the edge of the stone looks like it darkens from the ground up, even though your shoes are dry and you smell metal with a sweetness like something long ago put away, do yourself a favor. Don't crouch. Don't call out. Don't put your face close to the seam, even if you are sure you'll just prove to yourself it's dumb. You don't need to be brave there. There are better places to be brave. And if you hear anyone say all good from a direction that doesn't have a mouth, don't answer back, even if it sounds exactly like you, especially then. I'm not the kind of person who tells ghost stories. I'm a pretty boring practical guy who works an IT help desk in the Loop and spends most of his time reminding people to restart their laptops. But I need to get this out, and if any place is appropriate for it, it's here. If you're local to Chicago, you probably know Bachelor's Grove. It's that little broken cemetery tucked into the Cook County woods off the Midlothian Turnpike, across from Rubio Woods. People talk about the White Lady, the phantom farmhouse, lights over the pond. I used to roll my eyes at all that. I figured the scariest thing out there would be poison ivy or a rusted nail. This happened on a Saturday in late September about 2 years ago. The air had that heavy, leaf mulch smell the forest preserves get when summer finally loosens its grip. I went with my cousin Evan and our friend Maya. We tagged along with one of those free Facebook paranormal exploration meetups led by a guy named Ray. 40-ish, energetic, battery packs clipped to his belt like a Batman utility rig. There were maybe a dozen of us total. 2 girls who worked at a coffee shop in Pilsen, a quiet married couple from Oak Lawn, an older man in a Sox jacket who said he'd grown up nearby, and a skinny guy with a brand new spirit box he kept calling my rig like he was about to DJ a wedding. We parked along the shoulder by Rubio Woods just before sunset, when the Forest Preserve police are usually making their last sweep. A cop cruiser rolled slow. The officer looked at us and Ray did the whole "we're just walking" routine. The cop sighed and said, "Be out by dark." And then, like an afterthought, "Don't lean on anything out there." He had a sideways smile when he said it, like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't match the smile. After he pulled away, Sox Jacket muttered, "They say that every time," and nobody laughed. If you've never been, the path into Bachelor's Grove is a skinny, muddy cut through tall grass that runs along a black, still ditch. You walk, and then it appears. The small square of cemetery carved out of the trees. Crooked tablet stones, broken bases. Names washed thin by time. There's a chain-link fence someone keeps trying to keep repaired, but it always looks slumped and tired. On the far side is the pond, which everyone calls a lagoon like that makes it fancier, but it's really just a dark mirror ringed in reeds. Mosquitoes rose in slow clouds as the light faded. The woods feel close there, hours earlier than the sky gets dark. Sound gets absorbed, like the trees and the ground eat it. I told myself this was going to be an urban exploration thing. Take some photos, check out the vandalized stones, maybe catch a weird light and argue later about whether it was a firefly. Evan brought a handheld recorder because he works in audio and loves collecting room tone. Maya, she was in grad school then, sociocultural anthropology, wanted to see how legends grow. She said that like it wasn't a creepy way to spend a Saturday night. We were all in our 30s, not kids, not thrill seekers. We just wanted a story to tell. Ray did his spiel by the entrance. Respect the stones, don't climb on anything, don't litter, no Ouija boards, no provocation. "We're not here to taunt Grandma," he said. "We're here to observe." Then he clapped and grinned. "Let's split into smaller groups. If you get anything strange, shout." That last part landed weird in my head. Shout. It felt like calling the ocean and telling it to use its inside voice. We drifted to the back corner where a rectangular structure sat half sunk in weeds. The local shorthand always calls it the mausoleum, but it's not like the ornate marble ones you see in big city cemeteries. It looked like a small shed built of dark stone, stained with algae and graffiti. Someone had pried the heavy metal door off decades ago. Inside, it was just a windowless box with a damp concrete floor. Whatever had been stored there, bones, tools, nothing, was long gone. Still, everyone called it the mausoleum, and you could tell it had collected stories like burrs. Sock's jacket caught up with us and nodded at the structure. My older brother dared his friend to lean on it when they were in high school, he said. Buddy ended up at Palace with a ruptured eardrum, said it screamed at him. He doesn't come here anymore. He put a hand on the stone very lightly, like testing a hot pan. I don't lean. Not since. Evan rolled his eyes, not meanly, just habit. Sound can do damage, he said. You get enough pressure at the right frequency. He shrugged, like a physics teacher. But he kept his distance too. I can't pinpoint the moment the place got weird. It wasn't like a switch. It was more like the woods tightened around us a little at a time. The air lost its crickets. The pond's frogs stopped their soft motorboat sounds. Even our own footsteps felt soft, like we were walking on a mattress. Maya kept glancing behind us. She said later it was because the path in was suddenly hard to see, like the distance back to the road had stretched. Evan set his recorder on the ledge by the doorway. He ran a decibel app on his phone just because he always does. He likes numbers. Baseline, he said, and started talking into the recorder, including date and time like a crime scene tech. I pulled out my own phone to shoot a little video and realized I had almost no service even though I'd had 3 bars by the car. Not surprising in the woods, but still annoying. The 2 coffee shop girls wandered up, one of them rubbing her arms like she had a chill. "Do you guys feel that?" she said. "The, buzzing?" Her friend said, "No, shut up, you're freaking me out," and pretended to laugh. I didn't say it out loud, but yeah, I felt it. It was faint, like a truck idling a block away, except the forest preserve doesn't have those kinds of trucks after hours. It wasn't in my ears, not exactly. It was almost inside my chest, a very low, steady hum. It came and went in little waves. Evan crouched by his recorder and frowned, the way he does when something doesn't line up. "Weird," he said. "Noise floor's lower than out by the road, but I'm getting low-frequency stuff in bursts." He tapped his phone. "Like 40, 50 hertz. Too low for a scream." He grinned at me. "Relax." Ray's voice floated over the broken stones from the other side of the cemetery. "If anybody feels uncomfortable, step away. Don't push yourself." I didn't think he was talking to us, but the timing made me want to put my hands in my pockets so I didn't touch anything. Maya moved closer to the mausoleum and peered inside. "There's nothing in here," she said. "Nothing to hide. Behind, no speakers. People would have to." She stopped. Her head angled like she was trying to hear a neighbor through a wall. "Do you hear the tapping?" she whispered. I held my breath. Then I heard it. Faint. Faint. Like fingertips. On drywall. 1, 2, 3, then a pause, then 1, 2, 3, 4. The pattern was wrong for a woodpecker, and there were no trees touching the structure. The coffee shop girls bolted. "Nope," one of them said. "Nope, nope." They speed-walked toward the path, whispering apologies to Ray as they passed. Him. Sock's jacket kept his eye on the stone like it was a stubborn dog. He took a step back. "It does that," he said. "Tapping first. Sometimes you feel it in your teeth, then the scream." He pointed at his molars. "You'll know." I told myself it was some kind of temperature shift, thermal expansion, the day's heat leaving the stones. Except the temperature had dropped all at once, no slow fade. My fingers were getting stiff, which is stupid because it wasn't that cold, but you tell your body that when it decides to get nervous. Then the skinny guy with the spirit box wandered over, jittery with excitement, and said, "Want to try it?" He looked at me like I had asked. Before we could answer, he leaned his back against the mausoleum wall, pressed the spirit box to his chest to couple it, and grinned like he'd invented ghost radio. "Tell us your name," he said into the dark doorway. Static chattered and flipped stations. A female voice dipped through for a half-second, not a name, just a soft vowel sound. "Ah," and the skinny guy giggled. "Whoa," he said. It said. The scream punched through the stone. I say through because it wasn't like a shout from inside a room or from the woods. It was as if the sound originated inside the solid block and passed outward through it, the way heat does. From a stove, it wasn't a high Hollywood scream, it was a ripping pressure wave. It hit the skinny guy first because he was physically leaning on the wall. He flinched so hard the spirit box dropped and smashed into the dirt. His mouth made an O, his eyes watered, and he slid down the wall to his knees, hands clapped over, his ears not like he was trying to block noise, but like he was afraid something would leak out from the inside. The sound wasn't loud the way a car horn is loud, it was loud the way an airplane descent is loud, but inside your skull. Every hair on my arm stood up. My vision shuddered for a second, like the world dimmed and brightened. Evan shouted in a way I'd never heard from him, a raw sound. He bent double, hands to his left ear. Blood didn't pour, nothing like that. But I saw a dark dampness spread across his palm. Maya grabbed his shoulders and tried to pull him away from the wall, and instead the scream hit again. Another wave, a second tide, and dust puffed from the joints in the stone like breath from a sleeping animal's mouth in winter. "Back!" Ray yelled from somewhere. "Everyone back!" I took 2 fast steps and a half stumble, and I swear to you I felt fingertips on my spine. Not pushing me forward, not grabbing. Tapping. The exact same 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4 we'd heard moments earlier. The tapping traveled up between my shoulder blades. Not sharp pain, just urgent. Evan made a sound like he was trying to hold his stomach in with his hands, though it was his ear, and Maya was yelling his name, and the skinny guy had fallen onto his side and was whispering, I'm sorry, to the stone like it was a person he'd bumped into. The scream stopped like a switch was thrown. The silence after it was thicker than any silence I've ever felt, like someone stacked soft furniture on top of us. We all stood there, breathing. I could hear the pond again, the thin hiss of wind through the grass, the distant whoosh of a car on the turnpike. The world returned so fast it felt like whiplash. Hospital, Maya said to me, already pulling Evan toward the path. Evan's face was gray. It's weird, he kept saying, like he was describing a wine. Tasting. Pressure. It popped. Ray met us at the gate. Do you need me to call? He said, meaning an ambulance. We said no. We were closer to Palace by car than any waiting time out there. Ray pressed a folded napkin into Maya's hand and said, softly, it doesn't always do that. It's not your fault. He wasn't looking at Evan. He was looking over our shoulders at the mausoleum. The emergency room doctor said, barotrauma and spontaneous perforation, and this happens, with fireworks too. Evan tried to explain the scream, and the doctor gave us the polite Midwestern smile he probably used for every 4th of July patient. They put a little paper cone in Evan's ear, told him not to get water in it, and sent us home. The audiologist he saw later found a small tear in the membrane. It'll heal, she said. You're lucky. Evan nodded like he believed her and then asked whether you could measure a scream like pressure. She said sure, and he said, my app spiked to 119 for 2 seconds. She said phones aren't calibrated, which didn't answer the question. That night I lay in bed and felt the tapping against my headboard. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4. I told myself it was the building, pipes, heat coming on. It wasn't cold enough for the heat. The tapping moved. It traveled. I felt it behind my knees, then my lower back, like a child under the bed pushing at random. I rolled over and pressed my palm to the wall. It was cool and smooth. The tapping sunk away like it had retreated to another room. The next day, Maya texted me a screenshot from a sound editor. It was the recorded moment of the scream, the part where, to our ears, a sound had flattened everything. On the waveform, it looked like a gap followed by low thunder. There's almost no high frequency in it, she said. It's like something removed the scream and left its shadow. Evan wrote, sounds can create standing waves in enclosed spaces. The stone could have. I don't know. Then he didn't text for a couple hours, which isn't like him, and when he finally did, it was just ear ringing. Hurts. We agreed not to tell a lot of people. It felt too easy to ruin it, to smash it into a cheap scare story. But we went back a week later because Maya wanted more context and Evan wanted to try another recording from a distance. And I, idiot that I am, wanted to prove to myself that the world is ordinary. We went in the late afternoon this time, when sun makes the pond look like a dark coin. The cemetery was empty except for a family taking photos by the oldest stone. A mom with 2 teens who were already bored. No Ray. No gear. The woods were just woods. We brought flowers because it seemed respectful, though to what? I couldn't tell you. We didn't get close. We stood 6 or 7 feet from the mausoleum and waited. I felt fine at first. Then the hum started up again in my chest. Maya touched my elbow. Don't lean, she said, though I wasn't. The air felt like it had when we put our new front door in at my apartment, and before the insulation was set. Draft, where there should be none. Evan turned on the recorder and set it on the ground, not on the wall. "If you want us to go," he said, actually said this out loud in his normal voice like we were at a neighbor's door. "We'll go. We brought flowers." He set the flowers by the corner. Nothing happened. Good, I told myself, it's a cool legend, that's all. Then someone, a woman's voice far back on the trail, called, "Hello?" And the hum stopped. Evan said, "Okay," very quietly, and we all started to walk away. After we'd taken maybe 5 steps, we felt the faintest tremor under our feet, like a very far train. The kind of thing you can convince yourself you imagined. The tapping surfaced once, twice, from the ground, instead of the wall. I don't know how to explain how I knew it wasn't telling us to leave. It felt like someone inside a locked room putting their palm to the door, not to push it open, but to remind themselves there was something solid on the other side. We didn't go back for a while after that. Life filled up. Maya had field work. Evan's ear healed mostly. He still gets tinnitus sometimes, not a whine but a flanging like a voice through a fan. I took a later shift at work for a few months, riding home after midnight on the Orange Line. I learned which end of the cars were quiet, which drivers took corners soft. Here's the part I haven't told anyone but them. It followed me. Not every night, not consistently. I work on the 17th floor, and sometimes the elevator took a breath before the doors opened and I felt the tapping travel up the inside of the car's back panel. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4, thin. As the memory of a touch. I'd step forward without meaning to, just a hair, like I was expecting hands to move me. In my apartment, I stopped leaning my head against the cool wall when I read. At work, I found myself pulling my chair a half-inch from the desk so the back didn't rest against it. You don't realize how much you lean on things until you try to stop. The world is built for backs to find walls. Maya thought about it differently. She said legends are agreements people make about a place. They tell the same kind of story until it feels true, and then you start finding the story's shape even when you aren't looking for it. But sometimes the shape gets you first, she said. Sometimes the place is the story and we're the ones repeating ourselves. Evan asked me once in the car if I ever imagined the scream as a person. Like a who, he said. Not a what? I told him no, I didn't. If I give it a face, I'll start explaining it in a way that makes it small. The only thing that seemed true was the way pressure moved through stone and skin. The idea that a wall wasn't a wall if something decided to use it like a speaker. 2 months after that first night, I was on the train home. It was late. The car was mostly empty except for a guy in a Bears jacket asleep on the sideways seat and a woman with a grocery tote reading on her phone. The train ran smooth through one of those industrial gaps by Western where the city feels like it takes a breath. I had my eyes closed, leaning my head back, because I'd forgotten not to. My skull touched the cool panel and the tapping came, not from behind, but as if my headboard at home had been installed inside the train. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4. I opened my eyes. Nobody else reacted. The train didn't shudder. We slid through a yellow wash of light and back into dark. I told myself I'd stand up, that's all. Just stand and hold the pole, like normal smart people the PSA posters always show. But the tapping changed. As soon as I lifted my head, it rose higher into the narrow panel above the window, higher like it was guessing where I'd be if I put my head back. I felt a pressure in my ears, the plain descent pressure that muffles the world, and for a heartbeat for exactly 1 second, I heard the vowel. Not a word. Not a scream like your brain expects. A vowel, long and full, as if someone was constantly running out of breath and never did. The Bears guy snorted himself awake and rubbed his face. The woman with the grocery tote looked up, just a quick flick, and then back at her screen. My heart banged against my shirt like I'd run upstairs. Didn't lean back. I haven't leaned back on public transit since then. I don't lean against brick when I smoke outside my building, though I'm trying to quit that too. I don't take naps on the couch where my head touches the wall. I sleep in the middle of my bed with the headboard pulled 2 inches away and pillows jammed in the gap. Not because I think pillows will stop sound and not because I think anything can come through, but because it keeps me from forgetting and doing the thing that calls it closer. Maya says the scream at the mausoleum is probably like a church bell that rings at other frequencies too. We hear the big bell. It also rings tiny bells inside other things, elevator panels, train car walls, headboards if you lean. She said all this with her hands around a coffee mug, fingers tight like she was holding onto something hot. Or, she said, maybe the place just teaches you how to listen wrong. Evan doesn't theorize anymore. He throws a hand up when the subject comes up and says, I still get the warbly ring sometimes. It's worst in my left ear when I'm in old buildings. He switched from over-ear headphones to in-ears at work so nothing presses on the cartilage. If that's psychosomatic, so what? If it's not, so what? I went back once more, on a gray afternoon in November, that fuzzy edge season where the trees look like sketches of themselves. I went alone, not to poke at it. I told myself I'd put my hand on the fence and just look, like you look at an old-school building you used to hate and feel weirdly fond of from a distance. The cemetery was empty. The pond was flat enough to be metal. I stood a dozen feet away from the mausoleum and said, quietly, feeling very stupid, I hear you. I didn't lean. I didn't even shift my weight. A breeze ruffled the weeds, and I felt the softest buzz under my sternum. Not pressure, not the airplane thing. More like the feeling when you hum in your throat with your mouth closed. Then it was gone. I left the flowers I brought because it seemed like the right move. I didn't expect anything in return. I didn't get anything in return. That night in my apartment, the tapping happened once, very faint. 1, 2, 3, pause. Nothing after. I could have dreamed it, except I wasn't asleep yet. There's a security guard in my building named Jamal. Older guy, kind, always asks about my day like he means it. He told me they got a new camera installed by the 17th floor elevator because the old one kept glitching. Noise in the feed, he said. Looks like interference, but only when people lean on that back wall while they wait. Like the panel draws static from them. He laughed. Tape a sign on there, no leaning. I laughed too, more than the joke deserved. People always ask for advice at the end of these posts. Do, don't. If you're expecting some ironclad rule that will keep you safe, I'm not your guy. The only thing I know is this. There's something about that mausoleum that doesn't respect surfaces the way we do. The scream isn't a voice entering your ear from the air, it's a pressure that turns whatever you're touching into a mouth for a second. It doesn't care whether that's stone or wood or the glass panel of a train or the bones behind your face. If you go, don't provoke, don't perform bravery, don't put your back against anything, not even for a photo. Don't give it the shape it needs. I still ride the orange line. I still work on 17. Life's too short to route every step around the fear that a wall might sing at me. But sometimes on cold nights I see someone on the train lean back, tired from a long shift, and rest their head on the panel with a sigh. And I catch myself watching them the way you watch a glass on the edge of a table in a moving car. I want to say something. It always feels dramatically stupid to say don't lean. Then the train takes a curve and the person sits forward a little and the moment passes, and no one screams. And I ride home to a quiet apartment where the headboard is 2 inches from the wall, and the silence has a weight to it I never noticed before. And every now and then, for no clear reason, I hear a breathless vowel far away and feel a soft tapping on the inside of whatever I've trusted to hold me up.